The air at the edge of the world is perfectly still, holding the lingering golden warmth of the sun as it finally dips below the distant jagged horizon. You stand near the rim, looking out into a vast, silent ocean of stone. The canyon before you is not merely a physical place, it is a living atmosphere, a feeling of immense, quiet expanse that stretches far beyond the fragile limits of human vision. Down in the unfathomable depths, soft shadows are beginning to gather, pooling like dark violet water in the deepest crevices and valleys, while the highest peaks, mesas and ridges still catch the final, glowing embers of the fading daylight. You can watch as the harsh, burnt orange of the afternoon slowly softens into a bruised plum, and the bright golden limestone fades into a deep, velvety indigo. The true scale of it is impossible for the mind to fully grasp all at once, and that is precisely its quiet magic. You are small here, a fleeting observer on the edge of eternity, and in that smallness there is a profound and beautiful relief. All the heavy weights you may have been carrying today, all the immediate pressing urgencies of the waking world, simply dissolve into the sheer, incomprehensible vastness of this ancient landscape. The wind moves softly through the sparse needles of the pinyon pines, making a sound like a long, slow exhalation. There is absolutely nothing you need to accomplish in this moment. You only need to breathe and watch the colours shift as evening gently claims the Great Canyon. As we journey down through the layers of deep time and explore the quiet wonders of this remarkable sanctuary, you may hear things that softly fascinate you, or encounter images that beautifully spark your imagination in the dark. But there is a gentle rule here, in this fading light. You are under no obligation to hold on to any of it. You do not need to try to memorize a single detail. Let your mind soften, unclenching like a hand slowly opening in the warm night air. Let these ideas, these slow drifting fragments of history, flow over you and through you, much like the ancient river that carved this very stone. What naturally stays with you, stays. What slips away into the night, simply slips away. You are a peaceful passenger on this quiet current, drifting ever deeper into relaxation as we explore the slow, rhythmic heartbeat of the earth. Descend in your mind's eye now, far below the shifting purple shadows of the upper rim, down through layer upon colourful layer of painted rock, until you reach the very bottom of the great chasm, where the air is warm and the river flows cold and green. Here lies the bedrock foundation of the canyon, a dark, crystalline barrier known to geologists as the Vishnu schist. This stone is unimaginably ancient, forged in the dark roughly 1.8 billion years ago. To imagine touching it is to place your hand on the deep primordial memory of the earth itself. It was born in the extreme heat and crushing pressure of prehistoric mountain ranges that have long since worn away to absolute nothingness. When you envision these dark, jagged, vertically aligned walls rising from the water, you're witnessing the ultimate silent endurance of deep time. They have waited in the absolute dark for eons, patiently holding the immense weight of the world above them. They stand as a quiet testament to stability, an anchor of calm resilience that reminds us how beautifully the earth endures, long after the chaotic fires of its youth have cooled into heavy sleeping stone. Moving gently upward from that dark, billion-year-old foundation, your eyes might trace a curious, uneven line in the rock face, a place where one distinct layer meets another, but the chronological story seems mysteriously interrupted. Scientists softly call this quiet mystery the Great Unconformity. It is a striking geological boundary where sedimentary rocks from about 500 million years ago sit directly, intimately on top of those foundational rocks that are nearly 2 billion years old. Over 1 billion years of the Earth's history is simply missing from this vertical sequence, swept away by ancient winds, forgotten rains, and primordial waters, completely erased from the physical record. There is a deep poetic peace hidden within this massive absence of information. It gently reminds us that not everything in life needs to be perfectly recorded, and not every single moment needs to leave a lasting mark or a heavy scar. Sometimes, entire eras of our history simply wash away into the gentle tide of time, leaving behind a clean, beautifully smooth surface where an entirely new story can peacefully begin. And the author of this new story, the tireless, patient artist responsible for carving the canyon itself, is the Colorado River. It winds perpetually through the rocky depths like an emerald ribbon, its surface gleaming in the rare, scattered shafts of sunlight that manage to pierce the narrow inner gorge. We so often think of a canyon as a sudden, violent rupture, a rapid cracking of the Earth's crust, but its true origin is far gentler and infinitely more profound. The river did not break the Earth in a moment of fury. It patiently, persistently caressed it. Over 5 to 6 million slow, unhurried years, the water, armed with nothing more than soft sand, suspended silt and rolling pebbles, slowly wore through the absolute hardest stone on the continent. It is a beautiful, calming reminder of the supreme power of gentle persistence. Softness, when given enough time and unbroken focus, can gracefully reshape the most intimidating obstacles. The river never hurried, never forced its way in a panic. It simply flowed, and in its constant, peaceful flowing, it created a masterpiece that leaves the world in awe. As this emerald river continually flows, it sustains a hidden world that is not singular, but endlessly and wonderfully varied. The canyon is so incredibly vast, and its walls plunge so deeply into the earth that descending from the high rim down to the water is not merely a change in the local scenery. It is a slow journey across entire continents of shifting climate. At the very top, cool, damp winds sing through lush, fragrant forests of ponderosa pine and white-barked, quaking aspen, where soft, heavy snow rests peacefully on the branches throughout the winter months. But as you mentally drift downward into the canyon's embrace, the air slowly warms, the tall pines gracefully give way to hardy, twisted junipers, and eventually the landscape opens into the sparse, beautiful, sun-drenched stillness of a desert floor. To travel from the upper rim to the river below is the biological equivalent of walking from the cool, shadowed forests of Canada all the way to the warm, sun-baked deserts of Mexico. It is a landscape of perfectly contained worlds, stacked softly and seamlessly upon one another in perfect, quiet harmony. Within these seamlessly layered, contained worlds, the local wildlife has learned to beautifully harmonize with its surroundings, adopting the very textures and colors of the ancient canyon. If you were to walk softly through the dry, warm lower elevations, you might, though it is quite rare, unknowingly pass by one of the canyon's most beautifully adapted residents, the Grand Canyon pink rattlesnake. Do not let the mere name of the creature startle your resting mind. This animal is a supreme master of peaceful obscurity and deep relaxation. Over countless generations of slow evolution, it has perfectly adapted to match the delicate salmon, dusty rose, and pale peach hues of the surrounding sandstone rocks. It does not wish to be seen by the world, nor does it have any desire to disturb the quiet of the desert. It is a living, breathing extension of the warm rock itself, a quiet sleeper resting motionlessly in the afternoon sun, proving that nature's greatest and most profound instinct is often simply to blend in, to harmonize, and to become entirely one with the beautiful, silent background. Far above the sun-warmed rocks where these quiet creatures sleep, where the topmost layers of pale pink stone meet the brilliant, unbroken blue of the sky, rides a creature of truly magnificent, almost prehistoric scale. The California condor, a majestic bird with a shadow-casting wingspan stretching nearly 10 full feet wide, calmly steps off the precipice of the high limestone cliffs and effortlessly catches the unseen, rising currents of the warm air. It does not frantically flap its massive wings to struggle against the heavy pull of gravity. It simply opens them wide and completely allows the Earth's natural thermal updrafts to lift it higher and higher into the silent blue. It is a breathtaking masterclass in effortless surrendered flight, gliding in absolute unbroken silence for miles upon miles without a single exhausting beat of its wings. Watching a condor slowly circle the immense silent towers of stone is to watch a living shadow dance with the wind itself, a serene, floating reminder that sometimes the most effective way to move forward is not to struggle, but to surrender beautifully to the invisible forces that are already waiting to lift you. You might easily imagine, while watching these prehistoric-looking shadows glide endlessly over a landscape so monumental and old, that the heavy fossilized bones of giant dinosaurs must sleep deeply within these towering canyon walls. Yet, in a beautiful, unexpected twist of deep geological time, the Grand Canyon is entirely, completely devoid of dinosaur fossils. The vast majority of the rocks that form the staggering canyon walls are vastly older than the very first dinosaur, laid down patiently in the beds of ancient shallow seas and sweeping deserts hundreds of millions of years before giant reptiles ever walked the earth. And the softer rocks that once rested on the very top, the missing upper layers that would have eventually cradled the bones of those dinosaurs, were entirely swept away by the slow, relentless sweep of erosion long before the deep canyon itself was ever carved by the river. The canyon is remarkably too old, and simultaneously the act of its carving is far too young. It exists in a quiet, protective pocket of time all its own, keeping the tiny, delicate secrets of trilobites and ancient sea ferns resting in total peace, undisturbed by the heavy, echoing footsteps of the vanished giants. As the day gradually progresses over this fossil-free expanse of deep time, and the angle of the sun gently shifts across the sky, the true visual magic of these ancient rocks is slowly revealed in their ever-changing colours. The canyon is never just one static colour. It is a living, breathing canvas that responds to the moving light. The vibrant burning reds, the soft pale yellows, the deep mossy greens, and the gentle bruised purples that perfectly stripe the canyon walls are not merely coats of paint, but the slow, patient and beautiful rusting of the earth itself. Trace amounts of iron and various other heavy minerals, locked tightly within the grain of the stone, interact with seeping water and the oxygen in the air over millions of silent years to create this spectacular glowing palette. Iron oxide bleeds in streaks of crimson and warm rust, while other unseen minerals paint delicate bands of muted sage and pale gold. The entire canyon is literally glowing with the quiet elemental chemistry of the earth, catching the travelling sunlight and reflecting it back into the atmosphere as a warm, protective embrace of shifting colour. Yet, directly behind those brightly glowing walls of red and gold, hiding just out of the sun's warm reach in the cool shaded folds of the rock, lies another secret world entirely. The vast expanse of the Grand Canyon is secretly honeycombed with an estimated 1,000 hidden caves, silent pitch-black chambers winding deep into the porous limestone belly of the earth. And yet, of all these 1,000 hidden spaces, only a single one is ever open to the wandering public. The vast, overwhelming majority of them remain perfectly undisturbed, their delicate crystalline stalactites slowly dripping in absolute unbroken velvety darkness, totally unseen by human eyes for millennia. There is something deeply comforting, deeply soothing about the existence of this hidden, untouched wilderness. It is a gentle reminder that the modern world still holds profound, quiet secrets, perfectly preserved in the dark where no one can rush or disturb them. These forgotten caves are supreme sanctuaries of absolute silence, places where time is not measured in anxious minutes or fleeting hours, but in the slow, rhythmic, hypnotic falling of a single drop of water, over and over, into a cool, unseen, eternally waiting pool. When the sun finally vanishes entirely beyond the edge of the world, and the vibrant metallic colours of the canyon walls fade slowly into a unified, heavy and comforting blackness, the ultimate wonder of the Grand Canyon slowly reveals itself overhead. This vast, wildly unpopulated space is officially recognised as an international dark sky park, standing as one of the absolute purest, clearest places on the face of the Earth to view the depths of the cosmos. Without the harsh, chaotic interference of artificial city lights, the night sky does not merely appear, it completely dominates the visual world. The Milky Way stretches majestically across the great silent chasm, a thick, luminous, glowing river of ancient starlight that perfectly mirrors the unseen, rushing river of water miles below in the dark. Looking straight up from the quiet rim, you're bathing in the light of stars that has travelled through the absolute zero of space for thousands, sometimes millions of years, finally reaching your resting eyes in this exact, perfect, quiet moment. You're safely suspended right between the deep, ancient, rocky chasm of the sleeping Earth and the infinite, sparkling, boundless depths of the universe, safely cradled and completely at peace in the vast and beautiful dark. The velvet darkness of the canyon floor, where the river hums its low, rhythmic song, eventually gives way to the earliest hints of dawn, a soft pearlescent grey that slowly climbs the ancient limestone walls. As the light returns, it reveals a curious and delicate inhabitant of the high, rocky plateaus, the kaibab squirrel. This small, graceful creature is a living testament to the power of geography and the quiet persistence of isolation. With its charcoal grey body and a strikingly beautiful snowy white tail that flashes like a signal fire against the red earth, the kaibab squirrel is found nowhere else on the entire planet except for the north rim of the Grand Canyon. Thousands of years ago, as the canyon deepened and widened, the squirrel population was split in two, separated by a chasm they could no longer cross. While their cousins on the south rim evolved into the tufted-eared abert squirrel, the kaibab squirrels remained on their forested island in the sky, drifting into their own unique evolutionary rhythm. It is a comforting thought to realise that even in a world of constant movement, nature can find a way to settle into one perfect protected place and remain there, unchanged and serene for thousands of years. The stillness of that forested north rim, where the white-tailed squirrels move through the ponderosa pines, eventually yields to the sheer vertical reality of the canyon's depth. If you were to drop a small pebble from the very edge of the rim, it would not simply fall through empty air, it would pass through a vertical laboratory of sound and silence. The Grand Canyon is so vast and its geography so complex that it creates its own unique acoustic environment, often referred to by researchers as natural quiet. In many parts of the canyon, the background noise level is so incredibly low that it falls below the threshold of human hearing. In these pockets of absolute stillness, the only thing left to hear is the rhythmic beat of your own heart, or the soft, distant rush of the wind through 1,000 feet of space. This isn't a hollow silence, but a dense, tactile presence, a heavy, warm blanket of quiet that wraps around the mind. In a world that is often too loud and too fast, the canyon offers a rare and precious gift, a place where the air itself is at rest, allowing your thoughts to finally slow down and match the ancient, unhurried pace of the stone. As the mind settles into this profound silence, the eye begins to notice the smaller, more intricate details of the landscape, like the delicate, lace-like patterns of the cryptobiotic soil crust that covers much of the canyon's desert floor. This living skin of the earth is a fascinating community of cyanobacteria, lichens and mosses that work together in a silent, microscopic partnership to protect the desert from erosion. When it's dry, the crust looks like dark, knobby ripples in the sand, but after a rare, gentle rain, it absorbs moisture and turns a vibrant, healthy green. It is the invisible architect of the desert, a fragile but resilient foundation that holds the entire ecosystem together. It serves as a beautiful reminder that strength does not always have to be massive or loud like a mountain. Sometimes, the most important work is done by the smallest, most humble things, working together in the dark, quietly ensuring that the world remains stable and whole. Your breath may feel a little deeper now, as steady and reliable as the slow, seasonal changes that govern the canyon's life. This sense of reliability extends even to the way the canyon interacts with the atmosphere, occasionally creating a rare and breathtaking phenomenon known as a total cloud inversion. On certain cold winter mornings, when the temperature and moisture are just right, a thick, rolling sea of white fog pours into the canyon, filling it from rim to rim until the entire chasm disappears beneath a soft, fluffy carpet of clouds. From the edge, it looks as though you're standing on the shore of a vast, frozen ocean of vapor, with only the highest red rock peaks poking through like lonely, silent islands. For a few hours, the massive depth of the canyon is completely hidden, replaced by a world of soft, white emptiness. It is a moment of pure visual poetry, a reminder that even the most solid and permanent things in our lives can sometimes be softened and veiled, allowing us to see the world with a fresh sense of wonder and mystery. The ephemeral nature of the clouds eventually clears, revealing the solid, enduring presence of the Grand Canyon's most iconic landmark, the Great Dragon Temple. This massive red sandstone butte rises from the canyon floor with the architectural precision of a cathedral, carved by millions of years of wind and water into a shape that feels intentional, almost spiritual. Early explorers were so moved by these monumental formations that they named them after the gods and temples of ancient civilizations: Shiva Temple, Zoroaster Temple, Brahma Temple. These names reflect the feeling that the canyon is not just a geological feature, but a sacred gallery of Earth's most magnificent sculptures. To look upon these towers is to realize that nature is the ultimate artist, working with a scale and a timeline that far exceeds human imagination. These temples of stone stand in eternal, sun-drenched meditation, offering a sense of permanence and grandeur that allows your own worries to feel small, manageable, and temporary. In the long shadows cast by these stone cathedrals, the canyon holds onto memories that are far older than the names we've given them. Scattered throughout the various layers of the canyon are hidden pockets of fossilized sunlight, ancient petrified sand dunes known as the Coconino Sandstone. These frozen waves of pale, buff-coloured rock were once part of a vast wind-blown desert that existed nearly 275 million years ago. If you look closely at the texture of the stone, you can still see the elegant, sweeping curves of the dunes, preserved in mid-motion, as if the wind had suddenly decided to stop and rest forever. Within these dunes are the tiny, delicate footprints of early reptiles and insects, caught in the sand before it turned to stone. It is a profound thought to consider that the very ground you stand on was once a shifting, golden desert, and that the simple act of a creature walking across the sand could be preserved for hundreds of millions of years. It teaches us that nothing is ever truly lost. The Earth remembers everything, holding on to the smallest moments with a quiet, enduring grace. As you reflect on these ancient footprints, you might find your own sense of time beginning to stretch and soften, becoming as fluid as the water that continues to shape the canyon. Deep within the rock walls, there is a hidden network of springs and seeps that act as the canyon's lifeblood. One of the most famous is Vasey's Paradise, where fresh, cool water bursts directly out of a solid limestone cliff and tumbles down in a lush, green cascade of ferns and wildflowers. In the middle of an arid, sun-scorched desert, this sudden explosion of life feels like a miracle. These springs are fed by fossil water, rain and snowmelt that fell on the high plateaus thousands of years ago, slowly trickling through miles of solid rock before finally finding its way back to the light. The water you see falling today is a gift from a different age, a reminder that the earth is always nourishing us in ways we cannot see, and that the rewards of patience and persistence are often the most beautiful of all. The lush green life of the springs provides a vibrant contrast to the stark mineral beauty of the canyon's copper era. Long before it became a national park, the Grand Canyon was a place of quiet industry, where miners sought the rich veins of copper, lead, and zinc hidden within the walls. One of the most famous sites is the Grandview Mine, perched on a narrow, precarious ledge thousands of feet above the river. The miners built incredible hand-carved trails and stone structures that still cling to the cliffs today, slowly being reclaimed by the desert. There is a melancholy beauty in these weathered ruins, the rusted tools, the crumbling stone walls, and the quiet tunnels that now serve as homes for bats and owls. These sites remind us of the brief, flickering presence of human ambition in the face of geological time. The canyon does not judge our efforts. It simply outlasts them, slowly smoothing over our scars and incorporating our history into its own long, silent narrative. This narrative of endurance is also found in the ancient trees that cling to the canyon's rim, particularly the Great Basin bristlecone pines. Some of these trees are among the oldest living organisms on Earth, with twisted, wind-sculpted trunks that have stood guard over the canyon for thousands of years. Their wood is so dense and resinous that they are nearly immune to rot and insects, allowing them to survive in the harshest, most exposed environments. They grow with incredible slowness, sometimes adding only an inch of diameter over the course of a century. To touch the bark of a bristlecone pine is to touch a living bridge between the past and the present. These trees teach us the value of slow, steady growth and the beauty of weathering the storm with grace. They do not hurry to reach the sky. They simply endure, becoming more beautiful and more complex with every passing millennium, rooted deeply in the ancient wisdom of the canyon. As the wind whispers through the ancient needles of the pines, it carries with it the soft, rhythmic sound of the canyon's modern guardians. The Havasupai people, whose name means people of the blue-green water, have lived within the canyon for over 800 years, maintaining a deep and sacred connection to the land. Their village, Supai, is located at the bottom of a side canyon, accessible only by foot, mule, or helicopter. It is the only place in the United States where mail is still delivered by mule train, a slow and steady tradition that honours the pace of the canyon itself. The Havasupai believe that the turquoise waters of the Havasu Falls are a gift to be protected, a source of life and healing for all who visit. Their presence is a living reminder that the canyon is not just a geological wonder, but a home, a place where human culture and the natural world have learned to thrive together in a delicate, beautiful balance. This harmony between people and the earth is a quiet promise that as long as we respect the rhythms of the natural world, we will always find a place of belonging and peace. The turquoise water continues to flow, carving its way through the red earth and into the deeper mysteries of the canyon's heart, where the light begins to change once more, beckoning us toward the secrets held in the rising heat of the midday sun. As that golden midday sun climbs to its highest point, it completely bathes the uppermost edge of the canyon in brilliant, unblinking light, illuminating the pale, sun-bleached rock known as the Kaibab limestone. If you were to run your hand along this rough, high-altitude stone, feeling the coarse, warm grit beneath your fingertips, you would be touching the floor of an ancient, vanished ocean. It is a beautiful, mind-bending paradox that the very highest point of the Grand Canyon, resting over 7,000 feet above sea level, is entirely composed of millions of tiny, fossilized marine creatures. Sponges, delicate branching corals, and spiral-shelled mollusks are perfectly encased in the pale rock, resting silently in the dry desert air. These tiny ocean architects lived and died in a warm, shallow sea nearly 250 million years ago, long before the canyon itself ever began to open. Over unfathomable eons, tectonic forces slowly, gently lifted this ancient seabed thousands of feet into the sky. It is a profound shift in perspective to realize that when you stand on the rim, looking down into the dry, echoing depths, you're actually standing on the bottom of a prehistoric ocean, raised up to meet the clouds. This realization allows the mind to stretch and soften, recognizing that the Earth is constantly remaking itself, turning ocean floors into mountaintops in a slow, eternal dance of transformation. That ancient, vanished sea has left its quiet memory not just in the high limestone, but in the vibrant, flowing waters deep below. Far down in the eastern reaches of the canyon, there is a hidden, magical place where the main channel of the dark Emerald Colorado River is suddenly joined by a tributary known as the Little Colorado. The meeting of these two waters is not a violent crash, but a breathtakingly beautiful swirling of liquid colour. The water of the Little Colorado is heavily infused with dissolved calcium carbonate, the exact same mineral that forms the ancient limestone cliffs above. When this mineral-rich water flows over the rocky bed, it turns an incredibly bright, opaque shade of milky turquoise, glowing like a liquid gemstone poured directly into the dusty red gorge. The sharp, vibrant contrast between the sun-baked terracotta walls and this brilliant, ethereal blue water creates a scene that feels almost too beautiful to be real. It is an oasis of colour so vivid it seems to vibrate in the stillness. Watching these two immense rivers peacefully merge, the dark emerald gently accepting the bright turquoise, is a masterclass in harmony. The waters do not compete, they simply fold into one another, swirling in slow, hypnotic eddies until they become a single, unified current moving steadily toward the sea, a perfect image of graceful integration. In the quiet, shaded side canyons where this moisture gently lingers in the air, the desert holds on to its most delicate and patient secrets. The harsh brightness of the day might make the landscape appear entirely rugged and unforgiving, but as the body grows heavier and the mind settles into a rhythm of deep, undisturbed peace, you can begin to appreciate the soft, hidden life that waits for the dark. Here, clinging to the dry, rocky slopes, lives the night-blooming cereus, a humble, unremarkable-looking cactus with thin, spindly stems that perfectly mimic dead branches. For 364 days of the year, it sits in absolute, motionless silence, hiding in plain sight, asking for nothing and offering nothing to the scorching sun. But on one single, perfectly orchestrated night in midsummer, guided by the unseen pull of the moon and the gentle drop in temperature, it performs a solitary miracle. The cactus slowly unfurls a massive, brilliantly white flower, spanning up to 8 inches across, filling the cool night air with an incredibly rich, sweet perfume. It blooms exclusively in the dark, calling out to the silent, hovering sphinx moths that navigate by starlight. By the time the morning sun returns, the delicate flower has completely closed, its brief, beautiful purpose fulfilled. It is a profound testament to the power of waiting, a gentle reminder that true beauty does not need to be constantly on display. It can simply wait in the quiet dark for its perfect, fleeting moment to arrive. As your breath naturally slows, syncing with the patient, unhurried timeline of the desert flora, you can imagine venturing further into the deep, shadowed alcoves and hidden caves that honeycomb the canyon's lower walls. In these cool, profoundly silent chambers, time seems to stop entirely, preserving the echoes of those who walked this land long before the arrival of modern history. Tucked carefully away under large flat stones or nestled into deep crevices in the rock, archaeologists have discovered delicate, perfect little sculptures known as split-twig figurines. These tiny, fragile shapes, meticulously folded and wrapped from a single piece of flexible willow or cottonwood bark, resemble miniature deer or bighorn sheep. They were quietly placed in these dark, remote sanctuaries over 4,000 years ago by the ancient nomadic hunters of the desert archaic culture. The caves where they are found show absolutely no signs of human habitation, no fire pits, no broken pottery, no scattered tools. They were not homes, but sacred hidden shrines. The figurines were left in the total unbroken darkness as silent prayers or offerings, perfectly preserved by the dry, still air of the deep canyon. To think of a human hand carefully folding a willow branch 4 millennia ago and placing it gently in the dark where it would remain completely undisturbed until this very moment is to feel a deep, comforting connection to the vast, shared quiet of human history. Moving back up from the quiet depths of those sacred caves, emerging once again onto the high, windswept plateau that surrounds the canyon, you're met with one of the landscape's most astonishing and disorienting visual illusions. If you were to approach the Grand Canyon from a distance, walking across the vast sagebrush-covered plains of the high desert, you would have absolutely no idea that a monumental chasm was waiting just ahead of you. The surrounding land is incredibly flat and level, stretching out in a seamless, unbroken line toward the distant, hazy horizon. There are no towering mountain peaks to signal your arrival, no gradual slopes to prepare your eyes for the immense drop. The earth simply, silently opens up at your feet. You can be walking through a quiet, dusty forest of juniper and pinyon pine, lulled into a state of rhythmic, peaceful walking, and then, with a single, sudden step, the ground vanishes, revealing a dizzying, mile-deep expanse of glowing red temples and infinite shadows. This sudden, dramatic shift in scale is breathtakingly beautiful. It teaches us that the world is always capable of profound surprise, and that sometimes the most magnificent, life-changing realities are hidden completely out of sight, lying quietly just beneath the surface of the ordinary, waiting patiently for us to finally arrive at the edge. That vast invisible edge is not a single uniform boundary, but a story of two very different, beautifully contrasting worlds staring at one another across a gulf of empty air. The south rim, where the majority of wandering eyes first meet the canyon, sits at a high and comfortable elevation, bathed in warm sunlight and dotted with fragrant, drought-resistant shrubs. But if you cast your gaze across the 10-mile expanse of shimmering empty space to the north rim, you're looking at an entirely different climate, a completely separate world elevated an additional 1,000 feet into the sky. Because it reaches so much higher into the cool, thinning atmosphere, the north rim catches the heavy, wet winter storms that pass harmlessly over the south. While the sun gently warms the southern rocks, the north rim is often blanketed in deep, silent drifts of heavy white snow, supporting lush, dense, dark green forests of towering spruce, fir, and shivering aspen. The two rims are separated by only a few miles of open air, yet they are biologically as different as the arid deserts of Mexico and the deep, shadowed woods of Canada. This dramatic contrast serves as a beautiful, calming reminder of how wildly different perspectives can exist simultaneously, perfectly balancing each other across a shared space, neither one right or wrong, simply expressing the beautiful diversity of the exact same Earth. Within that vast shared space between the towering northern forests and the sun-baked southern cliffs, the sheer volume of empty air is so unbelievably immense that the canyon actually has the power to generate and control its own unique weather systems. The mind can simply drift as you imagine standing on the rim, safely watching a heavy dark storm cloud roll out over the vast centre of the gorge. The canyon is a master of thermal dynamics, a massive basin that captures the sun's heat, creating powerful invisible updrafts of warm air that constantly rise from the heated riverbed below. Often, a rainstorm will release a heavy, shimmering curtain of water high above the canyon, but because the air rising from the bottom is so incredibly hot and dry, the falling rain completely evaporates into nothingness before it ever reaches the canyon floor. This beautiful, ghost-like phenomenon is called virga. You can watch long, graceful wisps of dark rain falling from the clouds, trailing down like delicate grey jellyfish tentacles, only to vanish seamlessly into the warm, rising air returning to the atmosphere without ever touching the stone. It is a mesmerizing, deeply soothing display of nature's quiet magic, proving that not every storm has to make a harsh impact. Sometimes, the heavy things that fall from the sky simply dissolve into the warm air, evaporating peacefully long before they can ever reach the ground. Far to the west of those evaporating rains, in a remote and violently beautiful section of the canyon known as Torowap, the slow, carving power of the river was once met by an entirely different, incredibly dramatic force of nature. Here, the sheer walls do not step down in wide, gentle terraces, but plunge straight down in a terrifyingly beautiful vertical drop of 3,000 feet directly to the water. And spilling over the very edge of these sheer red cliffs are massive frozen waterfalls of pure black stone. Around 1 million years ago, a series of young active volcanoes, including the imposing cinder cone known as Vulcan's Throne, erupted violently on the very rim of the canyon. Rivers of molten, glowing red lava poured directly over the edge, cascading down the steep canyon walls like liquid fire, eventually pooling in the riverbed and forming massive steaming dams that completely block the mighty Colorado. Today, those ancient fires are long extinguished, but the evidence remains perfectly preserved in the form of these dramatic frozen black cascades, resting starkly against the ancient, vibrant red sandstone. It is a stunning visual contrast, the dark, heavy, once fluid basalt frozen in time, embracing the meticulously carved sedimentary rock. It tells a silent story of how even the most chaotic, fiery disruptions eventually cool, harden, and become a permanent, beautiful part of the landscape's long, peaceful history. As the river pushes past those ancient eroded lava dams, its character continuously changes, dictated entirely by the varying, beautiful width of the canyon itself. While we often think of the Grand Canyon as a single, uniform, immensely wide chasm, stretching up to 18 miles across in its most expansive sections, there are places where the stone suddenly, intimately closes in. In the upper reaches, near the beautiful echoing corridor known as Marble Canyon, the towering walls squeeze the river into a space scarcely a few hundred feet wide. Here, the rock is not broken and terraced, but smoothed and polished to a flawless glass-like finish by the relentless abrasive action of floodwaters carrying fine silt. The walls in these narrow corridors rise vertically, perfectly sheer and incredibly close, glowing in soft, luminous shades of pink, mauve, and deep burgundy. When the sun hits the water just right, the light reflects off the emerald surface and dances in rippling, fluid patterns across the smooth, polished stone walls, filling the narrow gorge with a soft, shifting, ambient glow. The feeling here is not one of terrifying exposure, but of profound, safe enclosure. The tight, polished walls wrap around the river like a gentle, protective embrace, a quiet, acoustic sanctuary where the sound of the water softly echoes, creating a continuous, lulling hum that vibrates deeply within the ancient stone. Clinging tenaciously to the high, sun-drenched ledges just above these polished, echoing narrows is a plant that perfectly embodies the slow, deliberate, unhurried essence of the canyon itself, the Utah agave. Often lovingly and accurately referred to as the sentry plant, it is a masterclass in profound patience. For decades it sits quietly on the steep rocky slopes, a low, unassuming rosette of thick, fleshy, silver-green leaves tipped with sharp, protective spines. It gathers the rare, scattered rain, storing every precious drop of moisture in its thick core, slowly, meticulously banking its energy over 15, 20, sometimes even 40 long years. It does not rush. It does not force its growth. It simply exists, perfectly adapted to the long, quiet intervals of desert time. And then, when it has finally gathered enough strength, it sends up a single, magnificent, towering stalk, growing at an astonishing rate of several inches a day, reaching up to 15 feet into the clear blue sky. This monumental stalk bursts into a brilliant display of vibrant yellow flowers, drawing in hummingbirds and bees from miles around. Having spent its entire decades-long life preparing for this one spectacular giving moment, the agave then gracefully releases its seeds to the canyon winds and slowly, peacefully dies. Its towering, dried stalk remains standing like a quiet sentinel on the canyon wall, a beautiful monument to a life lived slowly, deliberately, and with an incredibly beautiful, generous purpose, watching over the vast, winding expanse as we drift further along the river's timeless path. Following the river's timeless path, the surface of the water often appears as a smooth, heavy ribbon of opaque jade or deep, earthy rust, depending on the season and the recent rains. But beneath that seemingly calm, steady surface, an invisible and monumental act of heavy lifting is taking place in the dark. The Colorado River is not just made of water, it is a dense, flowing slurry of suspended sand, silt, and gravel. Every single day, as it winds through the deep gorge, it silently carries hundreds of thousands of tons of sediment toward the sea. The water itself acts as a massive sheet of liquid sandpaper, constantly, rhythmically grinding against the ancient bedrock. It is this unseen friction, this suspended weight of 1,000,000 tiny stones, that gives the river its true carving power. The surface remains beautifully smooth to the eye, masking the incredible, patient strength working deep below. It is a profoundly comforting reminder that true strength does not require turbulent splashing or loud declarations. The most transformative power is often entirely invisible, working quietly, steadily, and beautifully beneath the surface, shaping the world without ever needing to show its immense effort to the sky. Just a short distance from the heavy, churning power of that main channel, hidden away in a deep, sun-shielded side canyon, lies a miraculous contrast of water and stone known as Ribbon Falls. Here, a crystal-clear spring emerges from the high cliff, dropping over a massive freestanding spire of rock that stands alone in the centre of a naturally shaded amphitheatre. Over thousands of years, the minerals in this falling water have coated the towering spire in a thick textured layer of travertine, creating a perfect porous home for thousands of delicate bright green maidenhair ferns. The water does not crash here, it gently separates, falling like a soft beaded veil over the lush hanging gardens. The air in this hidden alcove is incredibly cool, smelling sweet and green, a pocket of vibrant, humid life surrounded by hundreds of miles of arid desert. You can let your shoulders soften and drop, just as the water falls softly over the moss, realizing that even in the most intimidating, harsh environments, life will always find a quiet corner to build something incredibly lush, delicate, and beautifully enduring. In the profound, shaded quiet of these hidden side canyons, where the ferns sway in the cool mist, the canyon's most majestic and solitary predators find their perfect refuge. The Grand Canyon mountain lion is a creature of absolute breathtaking stealth, perfectly evolved to move through this rugged vertical world without making a single sound. These magnificent tawny cats require immense stretches of unbroken wilderness to survive, with a single lion silently patrolling a territory that can span up to 150 square miles of mesas, deep ravines, and forested plateaus. They are the invisible guardians of the canyon, leaving only the softest indentations of their wide, padded paws in the dusty red soil. To know they are there is to feel the deep, wild pulse of the earth. They do not seek attention, they simply exist in the vastness, resting in the cool shadows of the limestone caves during the heat of the day, completely at peace in their immense solitude. There is a deep, resonant comfort in knowing that such vast, untamed spaces still exist in the world, allowing magnificent creatures to roam freely, beautifully unseen, and perfectly integrated into the silence. The padded footsteps of these elusive golden cats often carry them across vast terraces of stone that hold their own secret, nested histories within the rock. If you were to closely examine the sheer faces of the Redwall limestone, the prominent towering cliffs that form the most massive unbroken barriers in the canyon, you would notice strange purple-hued indentations scooped deeply into the pale rock. Geologists lovingly call these mysterious dark pockets the Temple Butte Formation. They are incredibly the fossilized remnants of ancient river channels that flowed and completely dried up over 385 million years ago. These prehistoric rivers carved their own miniature canyons into the limestone, which were later filled with dark purplish sediment and perfectly sealed by the shifting earth. You're looking at ancient rivers frozen entirely inside of ancient stone, a gorge within a gorge, a memory perfectly preserved inside another memory. It is a beautiful, staggering realization that the Earth keeps a flawless diary of every drop of water that has ever moved across its surface, holding on to those soft, flowing memories long after the waters themselves have vanished into the deep. When the sun finally dips below the highest edges of these memory-filled walls, the canyon undergoes its most spectacular, yet completely silent daily transformation. Long after the direct sunlight has abandoned the deepest parts of the gorge, the towering peaks and highest mesas begin to glow with an ethereal luminous light known as alpenglow. This is a breathtaking atmospheric phenomenon where the sun, now resting completely below the horizon, casts its final rays into the high atmosphere, where the light bounces off invisible dust and moisture to gently paint the canyon walls. The harsh, baked reds of the afternoon instantly soften into delicate glowing shades of peach, lavender, soft magenta, and bruised rose. The rock appears to be lit from within, emitting a warm, soft radiation that feels deeply soothing to the resting eye. Your breathing matches this slow, fading light, settling into a deep, steady rhythm as the mind realizes it has nowhere else it needs to be. The most beautiful light of the day comes not from the direct, blinding source of the sun, but from this soft, patient reflection, proving that endings can be the most beautiful, luminous part of any long journey. As that magenta glow slowly gives way to the velvet indigo of twilight, the nocturnal life of the canyon begins to awaken in the cooling air. Down by the trickling side creeks wrapped in the gathering dark, the tiny canyon tree frog begins its rhythmic pebble-like chorus. This amphibian is a master of absolute flawless camouflage, completely abandoning the typical bright green of a tree frog. Instead, its skin is perfectly textured and speckled in varying shades of grey, olive, and rust, mimicking the exact visual pattern of the ancient Zoroaster granite where it makes its home. When the small creature tucks its legs in and closes its eyes, it completely disappears, becoming entirely indistinguishable from the smooth, water-worn stones around it. It does not need armour or speed to survive, it only needs stillness. It thrives simply by trusting its environment so completely that it becomes a seamless part of it. It is a beautiful, calming lesson in the power of deep rest. When we simply stop moving, stop struggling to stand out, and allow ourselves to blend softly into our surroundings, we find the ultimate safety and peace. Occasionally, this evening chorus of the tree frogs is beautifully accompanied by the soft, distant murmur of a sudden, isolated desert rain shower, bringing with it one of the most intoxicating scents on the planet. When the rare, heavy raindrops finally strike the incredibly dry, sun-baked earth of the canyon rim, they release a profound, rich petrichor, magnified 100-fold by the surrounding flora. The dominant scent comes from the humble, unassuming creosote bush. The tiny, olive-green leaves of this resilient plant are coated in a specialized protective resin, designed to seal in precious moisture during the endless droughts. But the moment the rain kisses these leaves, the resin fills the air with an incredibly sharp, clean, and deeply earthy fragrance, a smell like ancient dust, sweet pine, and pure ozone-rich water all beautifully tangled together. The entire desert seems to exhale a long, fragrant sigh of absolute relief. To breathe in this scent is to breathe in the very essence of patience rewarded, a reminder that the earth knows exactly how to wait for the nourishment it needs, and how to beautifully celebrate the exact moment that relief finally arrives in the dark. High above the sweet-smelling desert floor, perched perfectly on the very edge of the canyon rim, stands a human structure designed to honour that very earth from which it was built. In the early 20th century, the visionary architect Mary Coulter designed the Desert View Watchtower, a magnificent stone observation tower that rises 70 feet into the sky. But Coulter did not want to conquer the landscape. She wanted to quietly surrender to it. She specifically designed the tower to look like a crumbling ancient ruin of the ancestral Puebloan people. She hand-selected massive, uncut boulders from the surrounding desert, insisting that the weathered, moss-covered and naturally scarred sides of the stones face outward. The result is a building that appears to have grown organically out of the rim itself, a seamless, perfectly camouflaged extension of the ancient bedrock. You can feel a similar comforting weight in your own resting body right now, sinking peacefully into the surface beneath you, feeling safe, heavy, and securely anchored to the world. The careful, deliberate placement of those weathered stones shows us that our greatest creations are not the ones that stubbornly stand apart from nature, but the ones that beautifully, humbly accept their place within its grand, sweeping design. The careful, deliberate placement of those stones by human hands is a quiet, loving rebellion against the canyon's most persistent, invisible, and natural architect, the silent expansion of winter ice. While the roaring river carves the deep, narrow trench at the very bottom, the staggering 18-mile width of the upper canyon is actually created by a slow, delicate process known as frost wedging. During the cold winter months on the high rim, melted snow gently seeps into microscopic cracks and tiny fissures in the exposed rock during the day. When the deep, freezing night arrives, that water silently turns to ice, expanding its volume by roughly 9%. This quiet, invisible expansion exerts an unbelievable pressure from inside the stone. Over millions of freezing nights and thawing days, this incredibly gentle, rhythmic breathing of the ice slowly, methodically, pries massive boulders away from the cliff face, sending them tumbling into the depths. It is a breathtaking reality that the vast, monumental width of the canyon is not entirely carved by catastrophic force, but by the quiet, microscopic and unstoppable expansion of freezing water in the dead of night, proving that even the hardest, most unyielding obstacles will eventually soften and break apart given enough patient time. The ice that shapes the upper rim eventually melts completely, beginning a long, incredibly dark journey down through miles of porous, thirsty limestone moving steadily toward a surprising destination. Deep below the north rim, halfway down the sheer cliff face, this ancient water finally bursts outward into the daylight at a place known as Roaring Springs. This massive natural aquifer pours thousands of gallons of pure, cool water out of a dark cave system every single minute, creating a stunning, cascading waterfall right in the middle of the vertical rock wall. But the most remarkable fact about Roaring Springs is what happens to the water next. Through an incredible feat of quiet engineering, a portion of this pristine water is captured and pumped not down, but entirely back up, travelling through a massive hidden pipeline that stretches across the entire canyon to supply all the drinking water for the millions of visitors on the south rim. In a landscape defined entirely by gravity, by the slow, inevitable downward fall of rock and river, this vital, life-giving water is gently pushed back up to the top. It is a beautiful, surprising defiance of the canyon's most basic rule, a quiet miracle demonstrating that even in a place where everything eventually falls, the forces of life will always find an ingenious way to rise, sustaining the world as we follow that cool, clear water flowing deeper into the quiet night. That cool, clear water flowing from the hidden springs does not merely travel through the dry earth. It actively builds and shapes an entirely new world in the dark. As it moves through the quiet side canyons, particularly in the breathtaking hidden oasis of Havasu Creek, the water carries dissolved limestone gathered from the ancient bedrock deep underground. When this mineral-rich, heavy current encounters a natural obstacle, it gently releases its load of calcium carbonate, slowly depositing it layer by layer to construct magnificent organic travertine dams. These natural underwater barriers eventually grow into cascading tiers of perfectly sculpted scalloped pools, cradling the vibrant, glowing turquoise water. The water is effectively carving the canyon with one hand, while delicately sculpting brand new, rounded architecture with the other. It is a mesmerizing, fluid cycle of breaking down the old and building up the new, constantly recreating the landscape in real time, completely out of sight. As you visualize these smooth, rounded pools of calm, glowing water, you can allow the muscles in your face to soften, releasing any tension you might be unconsciously holding in your jaw or your brow. The mind can simply drift over these quiet, terraced waters, resting peacefully in the beautiful knowledge that even as things constantly change and wash away, something profoundly beautiful is always being built in its place, drop by patient drop. As these clear, mineral-rich side streams finally merge back into the main, powerful artery of the Colorado River, they encounter a completely different, incredibly soft texture resting on the canyon floor. Tucked intimately away in the gentle curves and quiet swirling eddies of the massive gorge are pristine, secluded ribbons of pure, fine sand. These hidden beaches seem entirely out of place in a rugged vertical world absolutely dominated by jagged limestone and sheer granite cliffs. Yet, they are formed by millions of tiny individual grains of quartz and feldspar that have been carried by the dark river from hundreds of miles upstream, patiently polished by the tumbling water until they are incredibly smooth and perfectly round. During periods of high, rushing water, the river gently sweeps this soft sand up onto the rocky shores, creating perfect, smooth crescents of pale gold that hug the ancient stone. These silent beaches offer a profound, tactile contrast to the hard, unyielding walls. A place of absolute inviting softness nestled right in the heart of immense geological harshness. It is deeply soothing to imagine resting your tired body on one of these quiet, sandy banks in the cool evening air, feeling the fine, cool grains sift effortlessly through your open fingers. It serves as a gentle, comforting reminder that no matter how rigid or imposing the world may occasionally seem, there will always be pockets of pure, welcoming softness waiting for us if we simply let the slow current guide us there. Drifting slightly upward from those soft, sandy riverbanks, moving gracefully into the lush, shaded microclimates of the winding side canyons, the air becomes wonderfully sweet and fragrant, supporting life so delicate it almost defies the harsh reality of the desert. Here, fluttering silently in the dappled, soft green light of the willow trees, you might find the Grand Canyon ringlet, a small, exceedingly rare butterfly that exists exclusively within the canyon's sheltering protective walls. This fragile creature, with its muted, earthy brown wings adorned with delicate eye-like spots, lives its entire fleeting life entirely disconnected from the wide, sweeping, turbulent world above the rim. It does not possess the physical strength to fight the powerful thermal updrafts, so it remains safely in the peaceful, windless corridors of the lower gorge, floating effortlessly from one isolated seep spring to another. There is something profoundly calming and deeply grounding about its perfectly contained, simple existence. It does not need to cross massive continents or conquer vast, intimidating distances to fulfill its beautiful purpose. Your own body grows heavier, settling even more deeply into the present moment, as you realize that a small, quiet life, lived entirely within the safe embrace of a beautiful, protected sanctuary, is a complete and perfect life all on its own, completely free from the exhausting pressure of endless striving. High above those sheltered windless corridors, where the sheer, glowing red cliffs offer no apparent foothold for any living thing, moves a creature of completely different, yet equally masterful, adaptation. The desert bighorn sheep navigates the terrifying vertical drops of the canyon with a slow, deliberate grace that borders on the impossible. They do not cling to the rock in a panic with sharp claws or rely on sheer, exhausting muscle. Rather, they rely on a brilliant evolutionary masterpiece of design hidden silently in their very hooves. The outer edge of a bighorn's hoof is made of hard, protective keratin, allowing them to precisely dig into the smallest, most precarious ledges, but the true magic lies hidden in the centre. The sole of the hoof is composed of a soft, incredibly spongy rubber-like pad that instantly moulds itself to the exact texture and uneven shape of the ancient stone. When the sheep takes a confident step, this soft centre creates a natural, powerful suction cup, gripping the sheer, polished rock with absolute, unwavering security. Watching a bighorn sheep calmly walk across a 1,000-foot precipice is a breathtaking lesson in trusting one's own foundation. They do not rush. They place each foot with calm, absolute certainty, proving that when you have the right, perfectly adapted tools and a quiet, focused mind, even the most insurmountable walls become nothing more than a gentle, easily navigable path. That gentle, winding path often leads to much higher elevations where water is incredibly scarce, and a completely different, completely invisible artist takes over the incredibly slow work of shaping the stone. While the roaring heavy river is entirely responsible for the canyon's staggering mile-deep plunge, the incredibly intricate, smooth and sensual curves of the upper sandstone formations are primarily the patient work of the wind. This invisible process, known to geologists as aeolian erosion, is the absolute quietest form of monumental architecture on Earth. For millions of unbroken silent years, the wind has picked up microscopic grains of fine desert sand, sweeping them constantly and rhythmically against the softer layers of the rock. This endless whispering friction slowly, beautifully wears away the sharp corners and jagged, imposing edges, leaving behind beautifully rounded, undulating waves of solid stone that look as soft and fluid as heavily draped silk. The rock seems to completely surrender to the air, allowing itself to be gently moulded into shapes of profound, sweeping elegance. It is a beautiful, deeply relaxing meditation on the supreme power of an invisible, gentle force continuously applied over massive expanses of time. You do not always need an overwhelming, sudden rush of energy to change the rigid landscape of your life. Sometimes, the soft, persistent breath of the wind is more than enough to smooth out every harsh edge and reveal the beautiful, hidden grace beneath. As the wind continues its endless whispering work on the high, sunlit peaks, far below, in the very deepest, narrowest trenches of the inner gorge, there are completely hidden places where the sun is little more than a fleeting, forgotten rumour. Because the dark, metamorphic walls of the ancient basement rocks are so incredibly steep and narrow, there are certain hidden folds and deep, winding bends in the river that receive direct sunlight for only a few brief minutes a day, and sometimes during the depths of winter they receive no light at all. These profound, perpetual shadows create a unique, incredibly stable microclimate, where the temperature remains cool, constant, and beautifully unchanging, completely insulated from the scorching heat baking the upper terraces. To mentally enter these deep protective shadows is to step entirely out of the normal, frantic, rushing flow of daily time. Without the constant shifting markers of bright light and moving shadows sweeping across the ground, time seems to simply pool and collect in the dark water, resting as silently as the ancient stone itself. Your breath naturally settles into a long, slow, steady rhythm, perfectly matching this quiet, unchanging sanctuary. It is a deeply comforting realization that profoundly protected spaces still exist in the world. Quiet corners where the chaotic changes of the surface simply cannot reach, and where the mind can finally rest in cool, absolute, and unbroken stillness. That cool, absolute stillness of the deep water once carried a small, incredibly brave group of men who were the very first to truly map this hidden, shadowed world, and they did so not with overwhelming force, but with profound surrender. In the late summer of 1869, a one-armed explorer named John Wesley Powell led a small, quiet expedition down the entirely unknown Colorado River, navigating the immense, uncharted depths of the Grand Canyon in nothing more than 4 small, simple wooden rowboats. They had no reliable maps, absolutely no communication with the outside world, and no idea if the river ended in a massive, unsurvivable waterfall hidden in the dark. Yet, once they entered the deep vertical walls of the inner gorge, they physically could not turn back against the heavy, rushing current. Their only viable choice was to completely surrender to the forward motion of the powerful water. Their journey was not about stubbornly conquering the canyon, but about yielding to it, trusting completely that the river would eventually guide them through the darkness and safely back into the light. This incredible act of surrender holds a deep, resonant peace for the resting mind. Sometimes, when we are faced with the vast, unknown canyons of our own lives, the safest and most profound choice we can make is to simply stop fighting the heavy current, put down the oars, and allow the deep, powerful flow of the world to carry us exactly where we need to go. As those simple, fragile wooden boats drifted through the immense, echoing corridors of ancient stone, the men inside them were surrounded not just by rushing water and sheer rock, but by an almost incomprehensible, mind-expanding volume of empty space. The physical scale of the Grand Canyon is so staggeringly vast that it is often difficult for the human mind to truly measure or comprehend it. If you were to somehow seal the ends of the canyon and fill it entirely with air, it would hold roughly 1,300,000,000,000,000,000,000 gallons of atmosphere. It is not simply a narrow crack in the ground. It is a massive, contained ocean of sky, a colossal atmospheric basin that gently captures the wandering wind, the drifting clouds, and the slowly fading light. This sheer, unbroken volume of empty space is incredibly liberating to simply imagine. When you visualize standing on the edge of this immense open vessel, feeling the cool air rising endlessly from the depths, you can feel your own thoughts expanding, unspooling into the vastness. There is simply so much room here. Absolutely nothing needs to be held too tightly. Every lingering worry, every pressing, heavy thought can simply be released out over the rim, floating away into a quadrillion gallons of open, forgiving sky, dissolving seamlessly into absolute peaceful nothingness. When that massive ocean of open, forgiving sky eventually darkens, giving way to the deep, silent, star-filled night, the canyon prepares for its most ethereal, ghostly transformation under the soft, guiding light of a full moon. Because the air in the high desert is so incredibly clear, crisp, and completely free of heavy humidity, the moonlight does not scatter or diffuse. It strikes the canyon walls with astonishing crystalline brilliance. The pale, high-altitude limestone on the upper rims catches this pure silver light and reflects it deeply back into the gorge, acting as a massive natural mirror for the cosmos. Under the full moon, the harsh red and orange hues of the daytime completely vanish, replaced by a surreal, quiet, monochromatic dreamscape of shimmering silver, deep charcoal, and velvet black shadows. The entire canyon looks exactly as though it has been meticulously carved from a single, impossible block of internally glowing moonstone. The landscape becomes beautifully silent, cool, and profoundly luminous, glowing with a soft, borrowed light that gently reveals entirely new textures and hidden, subtle depths that the harsh, demanding sun completely obscures. It is a stunning, calming reminder that true beauty can exist in many different shifting forms, and that even in the absolute darkest, most quiet moments of the night, there is always a soft, beautiful, glowing light waiting to perfectly illuminate the way. As that pure silver moonlight travels incredibly slowly down the terraced walls, moving from the highest peaks to the deepest gorge, it gently illuminates the greatest, most beautifully exposed record of the Earth's deep history available anywhere on the entire planet. The Grand Canyon is, in its purest essence, a colossal silent clock, its ancient face meticulously etched into the vertical stone. Nowhere else on Earth can you safely stand in one place and look continuously down through over 2 billion years of unbroken, perfectly stacked geological time. Each horizontal band of softly coloured rock represents an entire unimaginable epoch. Tens of millions of years of ancient oceans rising and falling, vast deserts shifting in the wind, and massive mountain ranges being born and quietly wearing away to dust. As your resting eyes drift slowly down the layers, from the pale limestone of the rim down to the dark ancient schist at the very bottom, you are literally looking backward through deep time, peacefully reading the incredibly slow, patient autobiography of the Earth itself. It provides the ultimate, most comforting perspective. In the face of this staggering, silent, beautiful timeline, all of our brief human urgencies and daily stresses simply fade into quiet, floating insignificance. We are merely passing through a single, beautiful, fleeting second of the Earth's long, magnificent day, completely safe and held securely within the slow, deep rhythm of the ages, ready to sink even further into the peaceful, endlessly waiting Earth. As you sink deeper into that peaceful, endlessly waiting Earth, you might imagine running your fingertips along the rough, towering vertical walls, only to unexpectedly find the delicate horizontal memory of ancient shallow water. Preserved perfectly within the deep rust-coloured bands of the Menkopi Formation are vast expanses of fossilized ripple marks, frozen flawlessly in the solid stone. These gentle undulating patterns were left behind by the rhythmic ebb and flow of incredibly calm tidal flats and slow-moving coastal streams roughly 240 million years ago. You can actually see the exact shape of a tiny gentle wave that washed across a prehistoric shoreline, caught and held by the Earth for eternity. It is a stunning tactile bridge across an incomprehensible span of time, a place where you can reach out and directly touch the fossilized ghost of a gentle breeze blowing across shallow water. The body grows even heavier here, settling completely into the comforting reality that the Earth does not forget the softest, most fleeting moments of its past. It faithfully protects them, turning a gentle, passing ripple into a permanent, beautiful monument of stone. Far above these ancient fossilized tidal flats, where the dry plateau meets the open sky, the rim of the canyon offers an entirely different, completely invisible sensory experience that instantly grounds the wandering mind. If you were to walk slowly through the vast, dappled shade of the high elevation forests, you would be surrounded by the magnificent towering columns of the ponderosa pines. When the thick, puzzle-like bark of these massive trees is gently warmed by the afternoon sun, the forest does not smell like typical sharp pine needles. Instead, it exhales an incredibly rich, sweet, and comforting fragrance that perfectly mimics pure vanilla or warm butterscotch. This beautiful, unexpected scent naturally invites you to take a much longer, deeper, and slower breath, filling your lungs with the sweet, sun-baked air of the high desert. The trees are quietly releasing the stored warmth of the sun into the cool breeze, wrapping the entire rim in a fragrant, invisible blanket of absolute calm. You can allow your own breath to match this slow, steady release, exhaling any remaining tension into the sweet air, feeling completely anchored and beautifully safe in the warm, fragrant shadow of the ancient forest. This invisible, sweet fragrance of the dry forest is profoundly beautiful, largely because of its incredible resilience in a landscape defined by an overwhelming lack of moisture, a truth that makes the rare presence of water all the more magical. Tucked away in the remote, sweeping side canyon known as the Clear Creek Drainage is Chayava Falls, the absolute tallest waterfall in the entire Grand Canyon, plunging a staggering 800 feet over the sheer limestone cliffs. Yet, for the vast majority of the time, this monumental waterfall is completely silent and entirely dry, existing only as a dark, majestic stain on the sun-bleached rock. It is a sleeping giant that only awakens during years of exceptionally heavy, melting winter snowpack. It can sleep peacefully for years, sometimes decades, completely dormant, asking for absolutely nothing, and then, when the time is perfectly right, it bursts into a magnificent roaring cascade of pure white water. It is a deeply soothing reminder that you do not need to be constantly active, constantly flowing, or constantly producing to be entirely whole. There is a profound, beautiful grace in dormancy, a perfect wisdom in simply resting quietly for as long as you need, knowing that your energy will beautifully return exactly when it is meant to. When those rare, heavy snows finally melt, and that rushing water finds its way down into the dark, powerful main artery of the Colorado River, it joins a turbulent world that has shaped its own unique, incredibly resilient forms of life. Suspended deep within the heavy, churning, opaque green water is an ancient native fish known as the humpback chub. This remarkable creature has evolved entirely in response to the massive, chaotic energy of the river's most violent rapids. It possesses a smooth, silvery body and a distinctive fleshy hump just behind its head, a brilliant aerodynamic adaptation that acts exactly like a spoiler on a racing car. When the massive current pushes against this hump, it effortlessly forces the fish down against the riverbed, allowing it to hold its position in the rushing, roaring water with almost zero physical exertion. It does not frantically swim against the overwhelming current. It simply allows the heavy weight of the water to do the work for it, finding an absolute motionless anchor point right in the very center of the chaos. It is a masterful lesson in finding stillness, showing us that we do not always have to fight the heavy, rushing currents of our lives. Sometimes, with a slight shift in posture, we can use that very pressure to securely anchor ourselves in absolute peace. Escaping the tremendous churning energy of that main river channel, there are hidden side canyon sanctuaries where the water has carved rooms of such exquisite, serene perfection that they feel intentionally designed for pure rest. If you follow the sound of falling water up from the riverbank, you will discover the Deer Creek Patio, an astonishing geological formation resting just above a roaring 100-foot waterfall. Here, the water has meticulously carved a wide, flat, intimate space, completely enclosed by beautifully sculpted walls of ancient Tapete sandstone. The rock has been hollowed out into smooth, curving alcoves that look and feel exactly like perfectly designed stone lounge chairs bordering a crystal-clear whispering stream. The intense, deafening roar of the waterfall just a few feet away is completely muffled by the curving rock walls, leaving only the soft, ambient, musical trickling of the shallow water gliding over the smooth sandstone. It is an acoustic and physical sanctuary, a hidden, sun-warmed courtyard where the mind can completely empty itself, resting in the profound, quiet luxury of a room carved entirely by the patient, unhurried hand of the earth. In the profoundly peaceful quiet of these hidden patios and sheltered alcoves, the earliest human inhabitants of the canyon found the perfect canvas to quietly record their own brief, beautiful presence. Dispersed throughout the vast canyon are thousands of ancient silent pictographs, meticulously painted onto the smooth rock faces by the ancestral Pueblo and people, hundreds, sometimes thousands of years ago. These artists did not bring foreign materials into the gorge. They gathered hematite and red ochre directly from the very walls that surrounded them, grinding the iron-rich rocks into a fine, vibrant paste. When you look at these simple, elegant handprints and sweeping geometric lines glowing softly in the shaded alcoves, you're seeing the blood-red earth expressing itself through human hands. The colour of the art perfectly, seamlessly matches the colour of the towering cliffs above. Your mind can drift softly back through these silent centuries, feeling a deep, quiet kinship with the ancient people who sat exactly where you are sitting, looking out at the exact same, unchanging shadows, leaving a gentle, fading mark that says simply, peacefully, that they were here and that they belonged to the stone. Just beyond the reach of those sunlit painted walls, hiding deep within the absolute flawless blackness of the canyon's unmapped limestone caves, exists a delicate creature that has completely surrendered its need for the light. The Grand Canyon pseudo-scorpion is a tiny, incredibly fragile marvel of evolution that lives its entire quiet life in total unbroken darkness. Because there is absolutely no light in its deep subterranean world, it has evolved completely without eyes, trusting entirely in the absolute safety of the dark. It navigates its silent, cool environment flawlessly by using incredibly sensitive, elongated sensory hairs that gently brush against the smooth cave walls, feeling the subtle, shifting air currents and the soft textures of the stone. It is a beautiful, deeply comforting reminder that true vision is not always dependent on the eyes, and that absolute darkness is not an empty void to be feared, but a rich, tactile, and completely protective embrace. Even when we cannot see the distant path ahead, we can simply soften our focus, feel our way gently forward, and trust the quiet surrounding dark to hold us with absolute safety and profound care. The existence of these deep, water-carved caves completely hidden within the dry stone points to an incredibly beautiful, mind-expanding theory regarding the very birth of the river itself. For decades, geologists have pondered how the Colorado River could have carved through such an immense, towering uplift of solid rock. One of the most poetic and scientifically compelling ideas is known as the spillover theory. It suggests that many millions of years ago there was no continuous river at all, but rather a series of massive, isolated, incredibly calm lakes, completely trapped on the high plateau. For eons, these vast bodies of water sat in absolute stillness, slowly, patiently gathering the rain and the melting snow, completely locked in place. They did not rush, they simply waited, rising millimetre by quiet millimetre over millions of years. Finally, the water reached the exact brim of the lowest rock, spilling over beautifully and inevitably to connect with the next lake and the next, until the entire rushing system was born in a massive, unstoppable flow of connected energy. The canyon is the ultimate monument to the sheer, world-changing power of patient accumulation, proving that long periods of quiet waiting, of simply gathering our internal resources, are not wasted time, but the necessary prelude to a magnificent, effortless breakthrough. That sudden, monumental release of water that began millions of years ago continues its powerful journey today, but under incredibly different, profoundly chilled conditions. Although the high desert air above the rim can frequently soar to a searing, blinding 110 degrees in the peak of the summer, the heavy water flowing through the very bottom of the gorge remains locked in a state of perpetual icy winter. Because the modern flow of the Colorado River is entirely controlled by the massive Glen Canyon Dam located just upstream, the water is released from hundreds of feet deep within a dark, incredibly cold reservoir. As a result, the river water maintains a staggering constant temperature of around 46 degrees Fahrenheit, completely oblivious to the intense baking heat radiating from the Red Canyon walls just inches away. It is a stunning tactile contradiction, a freezing emerald ribbon of pure liquid ice slicing perfectly through the heart of a sun-scorched furnace. Imagining this deep, heavy, absolute cold provides a beautiful, refreshing contrast for the resting mind. A cool, soothing balm that instantly washes away the heat and exhaustion of the long day, carrying it swiftly downstream into the dark. As the cold, heavy air from that icy river naturally rises and meets the cooling evening twilight, it often creates one of the canyon's most breathtaking, hypnotic visual illusions. When the sun dips below the horizon and the deep, rich violet shadows begin to rapidly pool in the lower gorge, the heavy darkness visually swallows the base of the massive central rock formations. From the rim, iconic towering buttes like the Vishnu Temple or Wotan's Throne, structures that are thousands of feet tall and anchored securely to the earth, suddenly appear to be completely severed from the canyon floor. Suspended entirely on a thick, dark sea of purple haze, their sunlit, glowing peaks seem to detach from gravity entirely, floating beautifully and silently like massive, weightless islands in the darkening sky. The solid earth becomes an ocean of shadow, and the heavy stone becomes as light as a passing cloud. As these ancient, immovable stones seemingly surrender their immense weight to the gathering night, you too can completely release your hold on the waking world, allowing yourself to drift alongside them into the quiet, starlit expanse, floating effortlessly toward the deeper, more beautiful mysteries waiting just over the edge of the darkened rim. Drifting slowly over that darkened rim, descending deeply into the velvet mysteries of the long, quiet night, we enter a landscape where the very concept of time begins to fold, stretch, and beautifully contradict itself. We so often look at the Grand Canyon and imagine a single, unified story of the Colorado River, a heavy, watery sculpture that began its relentless downward carving roughly 6 million years ago. But hidden quietly within the complex, meandering geometry of the great shadowed gorge are completely distinct sections known to geologists as paleo-canyons, such as the mysterious hurricane segment, which tell an entirely different, almost unfathomable story of the Earth. Researchers have discovered that parts of these massive echoing corridors were actually carved nearly 70 million years ago, not by the mighty Colorado, but by ancient prehistoric river systems that flowed in the exact opposite direction. Over millions of quiet, unseen years, the deep tectonic plates shifted, the Earth slowly and dramatically tilted on its axis, and those ancient rivers entirely dried up, reversing their course and leaving their massive, beautifully carved channels completely empty. The younger Colorado River simply found these ancient, hollowed-out pathways and seamlessly adopted them, weaving a modern river directly into a prehistoric bed. It is a deeply soothing realization for the resting mind that even the most permanent, imposing landscapes are capable of profound, beautiful reversals. The Earth is constantly changing its mind, taking ancient, abandoned pathways and filling them effortlessly with entirely new life and a completely new direction, proving that it is never too late for the heavy current to gently change its course. As that modern river winds beautifully through those ancient, borrowed channels, it silently participates in a magnificent, invisible respiration that happens every single day, completely unnoticed by the rushing, waking world. The Grand Canyon is so unimaginably vast, so incredibly deep, that it literally breathes with the changing of the light. During the heat of the day, the air trapped in the deep, rocky bottoms slowly warms and gently expands, rising steadily up the sheer limestone walls in what meteorologists softly call an anabatic wind, an immense, slow inhalation of the sun-warmed earth. But as the sun vanishes entirely and the deep, cooling night takes hold, the temperature plummets and the air high on the plateau grows incredibly heavy and cool. This dense, chilled air begins to sink, flowing smoothly back down the terraces, plunging silently into the inner gorge as a katabatic wind, a long, sustained, and perfectly peaceful exhalation that carries the rich scent of dry sage and cool dust. The entire massive canyon breathes in with the light and breathes out with the dark. You might notice your own chest gently falling into this exact same unhurried ancient rhythm. As you inhale, you can feel a soft rising lightness, and as you exhale, a heavy, profound settling. Your body is perfectly synchronized with the slow, deep respiration of the earth, resting beautifully in the quiet, comforting pause between the breaths, resting securely in the deep, cool shadows where that descending evening wind finally settles. One of the canyon's most remarkable and quiet residents has completely perfected the absolute art of feeling safe. The common chuckwalla, a large, beautifully patterned desert lizard, spends its long days slowly absorbing the deep, radiant warmth of the sun-baked rocks. But when the light fades or it senses any distant disturbance, it does not frantically run or aggressively fight against the world. Instead, it quietly and deliberately slips into a narrow, perfectly sized crevice in the ancient, unyielding granite. Once securely inside the dark fold of the rock, it takes a slow, deep breath and gently inflates its loose folded skin with air, wedging itself completely and seamlessly into the solid stone. In this gently inflated, perfectly anchored state, it is entirely impossible to dislodge. It simply rests there in the dark, feeling the rough, cool texture of the rock against its scales, completely surrendered to the mountain, wrapped in an impenetrable, absolute embrace of the earth itself. It has found a brilliant way to use its own quiet breath to become entirely one with its surroundings. You can allow your own body to feel just as securely held right now, feeling the comforting, grounding weight of gravity pulling you down, gently wedged into the perfect, protective softness of your resting place, completely untouchable by the passing, fleeting worries of the waking world. Far below those hidden, resting creatures, at the very lowest, most secretive depths of the canyon, exists a vibrant, unexpected explosion of cool life that completely breaks the endless, heavy monochrome of the dark basement rock. Nestled intimately along the whispering banks of Bright Angel Creek, just before its clear waters join the heavy, opaque main river, stands a magnificent, carefully preserved grove of Fremont cottonwood trees. Against the harsh, ancient and jagged black schist that forms the deepest, most imposing walls of the inner gorge, the leaves of these massive, towering trees glow with an almost shocking, brilliant emerald green. They form a deeply shaded oasis in the absolute centre of a vertical desert. The delicate leaves of the cottonwood are beautifully shaped like wide, flat hearts, perfectly designed by nature's quiet hand to catch the absolute slightest, most delicate movement of the shifting air. When that cool, descending night wind rustles gently through the thick canopy, the leaves do not simply rustle, they create a soft, continuous, rushing sound that perfectly, flawlessly mimics the sound of a gentle, cascading waterfall. Even when you're turned completely away from the creek, resting in the shadows, the trees sing the soothing, hypnotic, endless song of moving water, filling the deep, heavy darkness with a continuous, lulling melody of rustling green life. The incredibly pure, cold water that feeds those singing cottonwoods does not arrive in a sudden, violent rush from the sky, but emerges through a process of unimaginable, patient, and completely silent filtration deep underground. High above the hidden oasis, resting securely between the sheer vertical cliffs, lies a thick, beautifully mottled, pale grey-green band of rock known as the Muav limestone. Unlike the solid, impenetrable layers of red sandstone situated directly above and below it, the Muav is incredibly porous, acting as a colossal horizontal stone sponge stretching continuously across hundreds of miles of the inner canyon's unseen architecture. When the heavy winter snows finally melt on the distant high rim, the water slowly, meticulously seeps down into the dry earth, eventually reaching this massive, porous layer. The water is caught here, slowly creeping molecule by molecule through microscopic winding channels in the absolute pitch-black dark of the solid rock. The water that finally beautifully weeps out of the lower cliff faces to form the delicate hanging gardens and feed the deep creeks has often been trapped inside the stone for decades, and sometimes for entire centuries. It is literally fossilized rain, filtered flawlessly through miles of ancient earth, purified by deep time and total darkness. It is a profound, calming reminder that some of the most beautiful, life-giving forces in our world require immense, unbroken periods of waiting silently in the dark before they are finally ready to emerge perfectly into the light. Resting silently just a few layers above that pale, water-bearing sponge is a band of solid rock that holds a memory completely at odds with the arid, echoing desert that surrounds it today. The Hermit Formation is a striking, deeply saturated band of dark, rust-red shale and soft siltstone that crumbles effortlessly under the gentlest touch. To look at its dry, baked, cracking surface is to see the quintessential essence of a harsh, unforgiving, sun-drenched desert environment. Yet, locked perfectly and permanently inside this crumbling red dust are the delicate, incredibly detailed fossilized impressions of massive, lush fern fronds, ancient broad-leafed seed ferns, and the fragile, intricate wings of giant prehistoric dragonflies. 280 million years ago, this exact place was not a deep, echoing canyon, nor a high, dry desert plateau, but a vast, sweltering, incredibly lush, muddy swamp resting lazily near the tranquil edge of a shallow, receding sea. The earth has held on to the delicate, soft memory of that humid, deeply green world, perfectly pressing it like a cherished, fragile leaf into the heavy pages of a massive red stone book. The landscape has completely, fundamentally transformed, baking in the sun for eons, but it never forgot where it came from. The dry red desert still quietly dreams of the lush green swamp, keeping its absolute deepest, softest memories completely safe and preserved inside the stone. Yeah. Those deeply protective, preserving qualities of the canyon's sheer stone walls were recognized and beautifully utilized by human hands over 1,000 years ago. High up on the dizzying, completely vertical faces of the Redwall limestone, tucked tightly and perfectly under overhanging protective ledges of rock, sit the ancient Nankoweap granaries. These are small, meticulously crafted storage rooms built by the ancestral Puebloan people, constructed from perfectly fitted stones and sealed incredibly tightly with a smooth red mud mortar. They were purposefully built in places so remarkably steep and seemingly inaccessible that merely reaching them requires an incredible act of courage, deep respect, and absolute, unwavering focus. Yet, these early inhabitants climbed the sheer red cliffs to store their absolute most precious resources: tiny seeds, dried corn, and essential grain, knowing beyond a doubt that the dry, constant, perfect temperature of the high rock would preserve their harvest flawlessly through the harshest, coldest winters and the longest, most punishing droughts. The granaries remain almost entirely intact today, a profound, enduring monument to foresight, deep environmental trust, and quiet preparation. There is absolutely no need to carry the heavy weight of tomorrow on your shoulders tonight. You can let your mind completely soften, trusting deeply that everything you truly need to sustain yourself has already been gathered, carefully prepared, and is resting safely and securely in the quiet, protected architecture of your own mind. Far above those silent, ancient, mud-sealed storehouses, the highest rim of the canyon relies on a completely different, gloriously accidental kind of preparation to sustain its sweeping, fragrant, high-altitude forests. The vast, beautifully textured woodlands of pinyon pine and twisted juniper that blanket the upper plateaus owe their very existence to a loud, beautifully blue, incredibly busy bird known as the pinyon jay. These highly intelligent, incredibly social birds spend the entirety of their brief autumns frantically harvesting the rich, calorie-dense nuts of the pinyon pines. With meticulous, frantic care, a single, moving flock of jays will bury tens of thousands of individual seeds in secret, hidden, shallow caches across the wide forest floor, preparing diligently for the deep, freezing snows ahead. They possess astonishing, almost superhuman spatial memories, returning perfectly to almost all of their hidden, scattered pantries, even when the ground is buried under feet of heavy white snow. But nature is beautifully, perfectly imperfect, and the busy birds always, inevitably forget a few. It is exactly these forgotten seeds, left completely alone in the dark, nurturing, freezing soil, that quietly sprout into the absolute next generation of massive, towering pines. The entire majestic, sheltering forest exists entirely because of a few small, beautiful mistakes made in the passing of the seasons. It gently teaches us that our own forgotten moments, our unintended wanderings, and the quiet things we leave behind often grow gracefully into the most beautiful, sheltering landscapes of our long lives. Occasionally diving with astonishing, breathless speed through the clear, thin air above those accidentally planted ancient forests, you might catch the fleeting, dark shadow of a peregrine falcon. This magnificent, sleek raptor is universally recognized by science as the absolute fastest animal on the face of the earth, capable of reaching mind-bending, terrifying speeds of over 240 miles per hour when it folds its aerodynamic wings and drops into a steep, focused hunting dive. By every measure of biology and physics, it is a creature defined by absolute speed, precision, and frantic, rushing energy. Yet, when you stand quietly on the rim and watch this phenomenal creature dive into the unfathomable 18-mile-wide expanse of the Grand Canyon, an incredible, mesmerizing visual illusion takes place in the mind. Against the staggering, monolithic backdrop of the ancient glowing temples of stone and the mile-deep pooling shadows, the fastest animal in the entire world appears to be moving incredibly slowly. The sheer, monumental scale of the canyon physically dilates time and bends our perception, turning a 200-mile-an-hour dive into a slow, graceful, drifting arc, looking exactly like a tiny speck of dust floating lazily in a quiet shaft of morning sunlight. The canyon effortlessly takes the absolute fastest, most rushing elements of the world and beautifully forces them to slow down, gently absorbing their frantic energy into its own vast, eternal, and unbroken stillness. If you were to follow the path of that beautifully slowed, diving falcon back up into the sky, reversing its steep trajectory, soaring effortlessly higher and higher, straight past the drifting white clouds and completely out of the Earth's thinning atmosphere, you would arrive at the ultimate, most profoundly peaceful vantage point of all. Looking down from the silent, weightless, hovering sanctuary of the International Space Station, orbiting exactly 250 miles above the curving surface of the planet, the Grand Canyon takes on an entirely new, deeply moving identity. From the absolute cold and perfect quiet of space, you cannot see the roaring, turbulent, heavy rapids of the river, nor can you feel the searing, baking heat of the inner gorge. You cannot hear the rushing wind or see the dizzying, terrifying vertical drops. Without borders, without maps, without the overwhelming, crushing scale that humbles the human eye on the ground, the Great Canyon simply looks like a delicate, incredibly beautiful, branching fracture on the smooth surface of a glowing blue and white marble. It looks exactly like a tiny, organic, branching vein of life, completely and flawlessly connected to the intricate, fragile, and perfect whole of the Earth. From this vast, floating, silent distance, everything that seems so overwhelmingly massive, everything that feels too huge to navigate or too impossibly deep to cross, is beautifully revealed to be just one small, perfect, peaceful detail resting quietly on the face of a sleeping world, as we continue to drift effortlessly together through the vast, unbroken, and comforting calm of the night. Returning from that silent, weightless orbit, allowing the mind to gently drift back down through the thinning atmosphere, we arrive once again at the high, heavily forested precipice of the North Rim during the deepest, most quiet months of the freezing winter. Here, beautifully blanketed under the towering spruce and fir trees, the landscape occasionally reveals a subtle, almost magical secret known as watermelon snow. When the temperature is perfectly freezing and the sun strikes the deep white drifts, microscopic algae named Chlamydomonas nivalis awaken softly from their icy slumber. To protect themselves from the intense high-altitude ultraviolet light, these tiny resting organisms produce a brilliant natural red pigment, transforming entire sweeping fields of pristine white snow into a soft, glowing shade of pale rose and delicate pink. If you were to gently scoop up a handful of this tinted snow, you would notice it even carries a faint, remarkably sweet scent, exactly like chilled fresh watermelon. It is a beautiful, deeply comforting reminder that life does not merely endure the freezing, dark winters, it actively, creatively adapts to them, painting the frozen world with soft, unexpected colours and sweet fragrances, proving that warmth and beauty can flourish quietly even in the coldest, most isolated environments. As that pale pink snow eventually begins its slow, seasonal melt, the pure, freezing water seeps silently down into the rough, porous surface of the pale Kaibab limestone. Hidden securely within this coarse, gritty, ancient seabed are beautiful, contrasting pockets of a completely different stone known as chert. Formed from the dissolved, microscopic silica of prehistoric sea sponges that thrived millions of years ago, these chert nodules are incredibly hard, dense, and perfectly smooth, resembling dark, polished glass or beautiful, rounded river stones trapped inside the pale, chalky rock. When the wind and rain slowly wear away the softer limestone over thousands of years, these smooth, glassy spheres are gently exposed to the light, sitting like polished, protective pearls resting safely within their rough, rocky shells. Running a hand over the canyon wall and suddenly feeling the unexpected, frictionless, cool smoothness of the chert against the rough, biting limestone is a profoundly grounding tactile surprise. It gently teaches the wandering mind that we all carry layers of profound, unbreakable smoothness and quiet resilience deep inside of us, hidden safely beneath the rougher, weathered exterior we show to the wind, waiting patiently to be beautifully revealed by time. Descending just below those smooth hidden pearls, the canyon walls suddenly dramatically shift from pale sun-bleached grey into an incredibly rich, overwhelming cascade of deep rust and vibrant burgundy. This massive descending layer is known to geologists as the Sapai Group, and it is entirely responsible for the iconic, staggering, step-like architecture that defines the visual majesty of the Grand Canyon. Unlike the sheer, terrifying vertical cliffs found deeper in the echoing gorge, the Sapai is composed of alternating bands of incredibly hard, resistant sandstone and soft, beautifully crumbly shale. As the softer shale gracefully and patiently erodes away over the eons, it leaves behind wide, flat, incredibly stable terraces, creating a colossal, perfectly proportioned red staircase fit for ancient giants. To visualize walking slowly, deliberately down these massive, flat, sun-warmed steps is to feel a profound sense of rhythmic, predictable peace. The body grows steadily heavier, and the breath naturally settles into an unhurried rhythmic cadence, beautifully matching the descending, patient architecture of the earth. You do not need to rush or leap into the unknown dark. The canyon has thoughtfully provided a wide, secure, and perfectly level place for you to rest your weary feet at every single stage of the long journey downward. Tucked quietly into the dusty, dry corners of those massive red stone steps lives a creature that has completely mastered the profound, calming art of staying perfectly still. The Grand Canyon desert tarantula is a large, gentle, beautifully fuzzy arachnid draped in soft shades of desert tan and dark brown. While the frantic modern world constantly demands endless movement and exhausting travel, the female tarantula embodies the absolute peaceful opposite. Once she finds a perfect, secure and sheltered burrow in the warm red earth, she meticulously lines it with incredibly soft silken threads to prevent the dry soil from crumbling inward, and then she simply stays. A single female tarantula can live continuously in the exact same quiet burrow for an astonishing 30 to 40 years. She does not wander into the dangerous unknown, she does not migrate across the vast echoing plateau, and she absolutely never hurries for any reason at all. She's a supreme master of her own small, comfortable domain, resting in the cool, dark earth, completely undisturbed by the passing decades. There is an immense deep relief in her story, a quiet validation that you do not need to constantly seek out new horizons or endlessly push forward. There is incredible, lasting beauty and profound safety in simply creating a soft, warm place for yourself and choosing to peacefully stay. The deep, abiding stillness of the red earth eventually yields to the continuous ancient motion of the river far below, a waterway whose very identity has beautifully transformed over the centuries. Today, we often gaze down from the rim and see a thick winding ribbon of brilliant opaque emerald green, coloured by the cool, clear waters released from the massive dams upstream. But for millions of unbroken years, and precisely when the very first wandering Spanish explorers stood in absolute awe on the dusty precipice, the rushing river looked entirely different to the resting eye. It was carrying such a massive, staggering, incredibly heavy volume of suspended red silt, eroded mud, and deep crimson clay from the sprawling painted deserts of the continent that the water itself ran completely, thickly red. This is exactly why it was named the Colorado River, meaning coloured red in Spanish. To picture that ancient, heavy, crimson river flowing like the deep, life-giving blood of the earth itself is to connect with the raw, unfiltered, prehistoric heartbeat of the canyon. The landscape has profoundly changed its colours, gracefully adapting to the presence of modern structures, but its immense, unyielding power and its beautiful winding path remain absolutely beautifully unbroken, flowing steadily toward the waiting sea. As that powerful winding river continuously carries those millions of tons of heavy red sediment out of the deep gorge and away toward the ocean, it inadvertently triggers one of the most magnificent, hidden and counterintuitive geological reactions on the entire planet. We naturally assume that a canyon is solely defined by the physical act of sinking, of water endlessly cutting deeper and deeper into the crust. However, because the river removes such an astronomical, staggering amount of physical weight from the centre of the Earth's crust every single day, the underlying mantle actually experiences a profound sense of physical relief. In a slow, magnificent process known as isostatic rebound, the entire floor of the Grand Canyon is actually literally floating upward, freed from the crushing ancient burden of billions of tons of heavy rock. The earth sighs, expands, and gently rises to meet the sky. As you let your mind simply drift over this incredible, monumental fact of the rising earth, you can feel an undeniable echo of that exact same profound lightness taking root in your own resting body. Absolutely nothing needs to be held too tightly tonight. As you consciously allow the heavy, accumulated, exhausting burdens of the long day to slowly wash away into the dark, your spirit naturally, effortlessly floats upward, rising beautifully into a state of absolute, unburdened peace. This unburdened, beautifully floating sensation mirrors a breathtaking, deeply ethereal atmospheric phenomenon that occasionally graces the very highest, mist-covered rocky ledges of the canyon rim exactly at the cold, quiet moment of sunrise. On certain crisp, perfectly still mornings, when a thick white sea of atmospheric fog settles deeply into the gorge, a lone observer standing on the precipice with the rising sun directly behind them might witness a magnificent optical illusion known as a Brocken spectre. The brilliant horizontal rays of the morning sun project the observer's own elongated shadow straight out onto the suspended floating mist. Surrounding the head of this massive, ghostly projected silhouette is a brilliant, shimmering, multicoloured halo of light, called a glory, created by the sunlight refracting perfectly through the microscopic floating water droplets. For a fleeting, magical moment, you are looking at your own peaceful reflection cast against the clouds, crowned by a glowing, circular rainbow, suspended beautifully in thin air. It is a deeply poetic, profoundly centering experience, a natural atmospheric reminder that we are all completely, intimately connected to the light in the ancient landscape, and that our quiet, resting presence here is both beautifully significant and entirely magical. Rooted tenaciously near those mist-covered glowing ledges, completely exposed to the harsh wind and the dizzying drop, grows a resilient plant that beautifully softens the intimidating scale of the vast chasm. The Stansbury Cliff Rose is a rugged, twisted, incredibly hardy evergreen shrub that seems to grow directly out of the solid, unforgiving limestone, finding life in microscopic cracks where no soil should possibly exist. For most of the year, it is a tough, unremarkable tangle of grey bark and dark green leaves. But in the late spring, it bursts into a glorious, prolific bloom of hundreds of delicate, pale yellow and creamy white flowers. A single, unassuming, small bush can miraculously perfume an entire mile of the rocky, windswept rim, carrying its sweet, profoundly welcoming scent perfectly on the unseen, ascending thermal winds that rise from the depths. The scent is indistinguishable from warm, sun-drenched honey and soft vanilla. It serves as a gentle, incredibly fragrant and permanent anchor for the wandering senses, proving that no matter how steep the climb, or how harsh the environment might initially appear, the world will always offer unexpected, incredibly sweet rewards to those who are patient enough to simply stop, rest, and breathe it all in. Following the sweet scent of those blossoms all the way down to the absolute bottom of the gorge, nestled intimately in a narrow shaded side canyon just steps from the rushing river, sits the only place of human refuge below the rim. Phantom Ranch is a small, profoundly peaceful collection of rustic stone and wood cabins, designed in the 1920s by the brilliant architect Mary Coulter. She specifically insisted that the buildings not compete with the monumental grandeur of the canyon, but completely submit to it. Every single, beautiful cabin was meticulously, thoughtfully built using the smooth, rounded, beautifully water-polished river rocks gathered directly from the adjacent rushing creek bed, and heavy, dark, rough-hewn timber that seamlessly, perfectly matches the thick trunks of the surrounding cottonwood trees. At night, there are no bright artificial streetlights here, only the incredibly soft, warm amber glow of small lanterns illuminating the dark, and the continuous lulling musical sound of Bright Angel Creek rushing endlessly over the smooth stones. It is the ultimate quiet sanctuary of isolation, completely unreachable by cars or roads, a perfectly contained hidden village of absolute rest, where the frantic speed of the modern world is completely, beautifully locked out by miles of solid, protective vertical stone. Stepping just outside the warm, lantern-lit glow of those peaceful stone cabins, you find yourself walking immediately alongside a dark, chocolate-brown layer of rock that holds one of the most significant, quietest milestones in the entire history of life on Earth. The Tapete sandstone rests almost at the very bottom of the Great Sequence, and it represents the exact, beautifully preserved moment of the Cambrian explosion. Before this specific layer of sand was gently laid down by a creeping ancient sea some 540 million years ago, life on Earth was entirely microscopic, soft, and completely silent. But locked perfectly inside the hard brown face of the tapetes are the fossilized wandering trails of ancient trilobites and the delicate tubular burrows of the very first primitive sea worms. It is the absolute dawn of complex moving life, completely frozen in the unyielding rock. As you gently trace your finger in your mind along these tiny meandering fossilized paths, you are physically touching the profound, quiet, and beautiful beginning of almost everything that moves on this planet. It is a deeply beautiful, profoundly comforting place to pause our long, wandering journey tonight, resting in the absolute basement of history, safely held by the ancient foundational stone, feeling deeply connected to the slow, beautiful, and unstoppable progression of life that continues to quietly unfold in the dark. Resting peacefully in that ancient foundational brown stone, gently tracing the dawn of moving life, your mind can slowly, softly drift just a fraction higher, moving seamlessly from the hard sandstone into a remarkably different, wonderfully forgiving texture. Resting directly on top of that firm, absolute basement of history is a thick, sweeping deposit known as the Bright Angel Shale. This soft, beautifully flaky rock completely abandons the harsh rusts and deep browns of the lower canyon, shifting the visual palette into incredibly soothing, muted shades of pale olive green, soft mustard yellow, and delicate bruised purple. It was formed hundreds of millions of years ago in a tranquil, shallow, and heavily oxygen-depleted sea, where incredibly fine, microscopic grains of mud were allowed to simply settle, completely undisturbed by heavy waves or turbulent currents. Because it is so wonderfully soft and pliable, this gently coloured shale does not form terrifying, sheer vertical cliffs. Instead, it erodes into smooth, sloping, forgiving hillsides that seem to gently recline against the steeper walls. To visualise this soft, crumbling, pastel-coloured mud is to feel a profound sense of yielding. It is a geological sigh of relief, a beautiful reminder that you do not always need to be as hard and unyielding as granite to endure the ages. There is immense, lasting strength in simply remaining soft, flexible, and completely at peace with the slow settling of the world. As you mentally rest on those soft, green sloping hills of ancient sea mud, feeling the steady, comforting pull of the earth holding you securely in place, a magnificent and completely invisible law of physics begins to alter your very reality. Because the Grand Canyon is essentially a colossal 18-mile wide void, a staggering, incomprehensible volume of missing rock that has been completely washed away to the sea, the literal physical mass of the earth directly beneath you is significantly less than it would be if you were resting on a flat, unbroken plain. In the highly precise language of geophysics, this massive empty space creates a localized negative gravity anomaly. The gravitational pull of the Earth is actually measurably, ever so slightly weaker here in the presence of this immense empty chasm. Without you doing absolutely anything at all, without any effort or intention, you are physically, mathematically lighter, simply by being near this beautifully vast open space. As the body grows heavier and settles more deeply into a state of profound relaxation, your spirit and your physical form are paradoxically wonderfully unburdened. The canyon gently, invisibly reaches out and takes a tiny fraction of your weight away, allowing you to float just a little more freely in the cool, quiet air. This profound, invisible sense of expansive lightness is perfectly mirrored in the physical architecture of the canyon by a sweeping, breathtaking feature known as the Tonto Platform. Deep within the gorge, situated perfectly between the terrifyingly steep drop of the inner metamorphic basement rocks and the towering, monumental red cliffs of the upper rims, the landscape suddenly, unexpectedly flattens out into a massive horizontal terrace. This remarkably level plain stretches continuously for dozens of miles, a vast open shelf of pale green sagebrush and dusty sun-baked earth, hovering thousands of feet above the hidden river. In a wildly dramatic world entirely defined by sheer verticality, by terrifying heights and dizzying depths, the Tonto platform is a colossal geological pause. It is a wide, safe, completely level sanctuary where the eye can finally stop looking up in awe or looking down in fear and simply look outward across a calm, peaceful horizontal horizon. It provides an immediate, profound sense of visual and emotional relief. It teaches the resting mind that even in the middle of our most dramatic, steep and towering life journeys, there will always be beautifully flat, sweeping plateaus waiting for us. Quiet, level places where we can catch our breath, walk easily, and simply rest in the wide-open middle of the story. Out on that vast, beautifully level expanse of the Tonto platform, where the arid desert sun bakes the dry, rocky soil into a hard, dusty crust, life has perfected an astonishing, miraculous form of absolute surrendered patience. Clinging intimately to the seemingly barren rock is a tiny, unassuming organism known as desert moss, specifically Centrichia caninervis. During the long, punishing, endless months of extreme drought, this moss completely shuts down. It completely desiccates, turning into a tiny, shriveled, brittle black wisp that appears entirely, absolutely lifeless. It does not fight the drought. It simply yields to it, entering a profound state of suspended animation, waiting in the dry heat without requiring a single drop of nourishment or energy. It can remain in this deep, dreamless, suspended sleep for decades. Yet, the absolute second a rare, gentle drop of rain finally touches its dry, blackened leaves, an astonishing resurrection occurs. Within mere seconds, the moss absorbs the water, instantly uncurling, plumping up and transforming into a vibrant, brilliant, incredibly lush shade of emerald green. It is a masterpiece of dormant potential. It proves, beautifully, that deep, prolonged rest is never a failure or an ending. You can allow yourself to completely power down, to rest in the quiet dark for as long as you need, trusting with absolute certainty that when the time is right, you possess the incredible inherent ability to bloom instantly and beautifully back to life, sharing that exact same sun-baked rocky floor with the sleeping moss is a beautifully unexpected, incredibly diverse community that has found its own unique, deeply comforting way to rest. When we imagine bees, we almost instinctively picture massive, buzzing, chaotic hives overflowing with thousands of frantic, working insects. But the Grand Canyon is actually a globally significant sanctuary for over 1,000 completely distinct species of native bees, and the vast, overwhelming majority of them are beautifully, perfectly solitary. These gentle, quiet pollinators do not live in complex societies or build towering honeycombs. Instead, when the long foraging day is finally done, a tiny solitary female bee will seek out a minuscule, perfectly sized, naturally occurring hole in the porous red sandstone. She will climb inside the cool rock, turning around until she perfectly fits the contours of the stone, and then she will gently, tightly curl her soft body into a tiny, perfect circle, going to sleep completely alone, perfectly sheltered and securely held by the immense weight of the canyon walls. The mind can simply drift toward this image of absolute tiny perfection. You can gently allow your own thoughts to curl inward, finding your own perfectly shaped, quiet space in the dark, safely wrapped and protected by the silent, heavy surrounding world. As those thousands of tiny solitary creatures sleep curled inside the ancient stone, the canyon's cool evening wind begins to move across the vast sweeping landscape, revealing an incredible, invisible symphony of sound. Because the Grand Canyon is composed of dozens of completely different layers of rock, each with its own unique density, texture, and crystalline structure, the wind does not make a single, uniform sound as it travels through the gorge. The canyon actually functions as a massive geological wind instrument. when the heavy, descending night air moves forcefully over the jagged, fractured, incredibly chaotic angles of the dark Vishnu schist at the very bottom, it creates a low, turbulent, resonant rumble, a deep bass that vibrates in the chest. But when that exact same wind gracefully sweeps over the perfectly smooth, sweeping, undulating curves of the pale Navajo sandstone higher up on the rim, the sound is entirely transformed into a high, pure, sustained, and delicate whistle. The invisible air is literally reading the physical texture of the earth, translating millions of years of complex geological history into a varied, beautiful, soothing acoustic lullaby. The landscape is quietly singing to itself in the dark, reminding us that every different texture and every uneven surface in our own lives has the potential to create its own unique, strangely beautiful music when the wind finally passes over it. That musical, wandering wind often follows the path of least resistance, channeling itself smoothly through immense natural corridors that slice entirely through the massive rock walls. One of the most famous and profoundly important of these corridors is the Bright Angel Fault. We are so often conditioned to think of geological faults and seismic fractures as terrifying, destructive forces that tear the world violently apart. But in the steep, impassable, terrifying verticality of the Grand Canyon, this deep, ancient fracture in the Earth's crust is a magnificent, life-giving blessing. The fault shattered the sheer, unscalable cliffs, creating a beautifully broken, sloping zone of weakness that allowed a gentle, incredibly manageable pathway to naturally form, connecting the high rim directly to the deep river. Even more importantly, the deep crack in the stone provided a perfect protected avenue for hidden, underground water to finally reach the surface, creating lush, green oases in the middle of the red dust. It is a stunning, calming realization that what initially appears to be a massive, devastating break or a painful fracture can actually become the most vital, forgiving, and necessary pathway, transforming a sheer, impossible wall into a gentle slope that invites life to beautifully, safely cross over. Rising effortlessly on the warm, invisible thermal updrafts that funnel through that life-giving fault line are the canyon's most intelligent, magnificently observant residents, the common ravens. With their deep, glossy black feathers completely absorbing the intense sunlight, these highly social, incredibly clever birds possess a relationship with the immense, empty space of the canyon that is entirely unique. Most creatures approach the terrifying, dizzying drops with profound caution, flying only to efficiently seek food or shelter. But the ravens use the massive, invisible columns of rising air for something completely different, something incredibly rare in the wild world: pure, unadulterated play. You can watch a pair of ravens soar thousands of feet above the river, intentionally dropping a small, heavy stone from their beaks, and then tucking their wings to dive at breathtaking speed, gracefully catching the stone again in midair just for the sheer, incredible joy of the game. They perform perfectly synchronized barrel rolls, soaring completely upside down in the vast, open void, totally unbothered by gravity or fear. They represent the ultimate, beautiful surrender to the elements. They show us the profound joy of occasionally letting go of our constant, serious striving, inviting us to simply play, to trust the invisible currents that support us, and to find absolute delight in the sweeping, open spaces of our lives. When those playful, diving ravens occasionally drop a small stick or a pine cone that falls all the way down to the very bottom of the Great Gorge, it joins a collection of much larger, far more ancient travellers resting peacefully by the water's edge. Strewn beautifully across the soft white sand beaches of the Colorado River are massive, silent pieces of ancient driftwood, lovingly referred to by river guides as ghost logs. These are not small branches, but the immense, heavy trunks of towering ponderosa pines that live for centuries on the high rim before finally, naturally falling into the rushing water. Once claimed by the river, these massive trees embark on a turbulent, chaotic, often violent journey downstream. Over decades of tumbling through the heavy rapids, they are completely stripped of their rough, dark bark. The river's suspended sand and silt act as a flawless liquid sandpaper, meticulously smoothing away every single broken branch and sharp edge. By the time the river finally sweeps them up onto a quiet sunlit beach, they are transformed into breathtaking sculptures of incredibly smooth, frictionless wood that glow with a brilliant luminous silver hue, looking exactly like beautifully polished bone. They are a profound meditation on the beauty of endurance. They have passed through the absolute harshest, most turbulent waters and emerged beautifully smoothed, entirely at peace, resting silently in the warm sun as magnificent silver monuments to a long journey finally completed. When the warm sun sets on those silver-polished logs and the absolute pristine darkness of the inner gorge takes hold, a final, completely silent miracle of light sometimes graces the mist-filled air near the roaring waterfalls. During the incredibly bright, luminous nights of a full moon, the light striking the canyon is strong enough to pierce the deep shadows, but soft enough to create something profoundly delicate. Where the heavy, cascading water of places like Deer Creek Falls smashes into the rocks, throwing a continuous, fine, hovering veil of mist into the cool night air, the bright moonlight perfectly refracts through the tiny, floating water droplets to create a lunar rainbow, or a moonbow. Because the human eye struggles to perceive vibrant colours in low light, this nighttime rainbow does not display the brilliant, overwhelming reds and blues of the daytime. Instead, it appears as a breathtaking, ghostly, glowing arc of pure, luminescent white and pale, shimmering silver, hovering silently and ethereally over the dark water. It is the gentle, quiet shadow of a rainbow, a fleeting, almost impossible brushstroke of silver light painted entirely onto the dark. It is the perfect, profoundly peaceful image to hold softly in the mind's eye as the heavy body sinks completely into the mattress, a quiet, glowing arc of silver mist, assuring you that even in the deepest, most absolute darkness of the night, beautiful, soft and miraculous light is always waiting to gently, quietly reveal itself, guiding you effortlessly deeper and deeper into a beautiful, unbroken sleep. As that ethereal, shimmering silver mist of the moonbow gracefully dissipates into the crisp, quiet morning air, the rising sun softly illuminates a massive, towering cliff face that holds one of the most magnificent visual secrets of the entire canyon. The awe-inspiring redwall limestone forms the most prominent, unbroken and dramatically sheer vertical barrier in the vast gorge, looking exactly like a staggering 500-foot-tall fortress wall of deep, vibrant crimson. It dominates the landscape, commanding the eye with its heavy, imposing colour. But if you were to somehow wash away the heavily weathered surface, or gently chip away a tiny microscopic fragment of the ancient hard stone, you would discover a breathtaking truth. The rock itself is actually a pristine, cool, dove grey. The stunning, iconic red is merely a beautifully painted facade, a delicate, completely superficial stain created by iron oxide slowly bleeding down from the rust-coloured Supai rocks, resting thousands of feet above it. Millions of years of gentle, sweeping rain and melting winter snow have meticulously washed the iron down the smooth face of the grey cliffs, dyeing them a vibrant, permanent rust. It is a beautiful, profound reminder that things are not always what they effortlessly appear to be on the surface. The harsh environment beautifully shapes and colours our outward appearance over long stretches of time. But at our deepest, untouched core, we often remain completely pure, cool, and beautifully unchanged by the heavy elements swirling around us. Moving gently upward from those stained, towering red cliffs to the cool, high-elevation plateaus of the North Rim, the heavy, iron-rich soil perfectly feeds vast, whispering forests that harbour an incredible, invisible secret of absolute, unwavering unity. Here, where the air grows noticeably thinner and smells sweetly of pine and damp earth, you find sprawling, luminous groves of quaking aspen trees. They stand proudly with their stark chalk-white bark and small, delicate, coin-shaped leaves that beautifully tremble and shimmer with a sound like rushing water in the absolute slightest breeze. While they appear to the resting eye as thousands of distinct individual trees scattered beautifully across the sun-drenched green meadows, beneath the cool, dark, protective soil, their root systems are entirely and perfectly interconnected. They are, in absolute reality, a single, massive, breathing living organism, a colossal clonal colony seamlessly sharing water, essential nutrients, and life force. When one distant, lonely trunk is thirsty or struggling in the dry earth, the surrounding network quietly, instinctively sends water across miles of hidden roots to gently sustain it. Your own breath can settle into a slow, steady rhythm as you realise the deep, abiding comfort of this hidden support system. We are rarely as isolated as we sometimes feel in the wide, echoing world. Beneath the surface, there is always a deep, unseen network of life and energy, gently holding us all together, nourishing us completely in the dark. In the warm, sun-dappled edges of those unified, shimmering groves, where the cool shade of the forest finally surrenders to the unforgiving, baking heat of the rocky precipice, a small creature navigates the shifting temperatures with absolute, graceful ingenuity. As the intense, high-altitude afternoon sun beats relentlessly down on the pale, dusty limestone, heating the ancient rock to an uncomfortable extreme, the Grand Canyon rock squirrel does not frantically retreat into the dark, echoing crevices to hide from the day. Instead, it possesses a remarkably simple, perfectly adapted and deeply charming solution. It gracefully flips its incredibly wide, exceptionally bushy, silver-tipped tail up and directly over its own head, using it exactly like a built-in portable parasol. This tiny personal canopy instantly blocks the harsh light, creating a perfect immediate pocket of cool, deep shade, dropping the squirrel's body temperature dramatically as it quietly and peacefully forages on the exposed, heated rock. It is a wonderfully calming, peaceful image that carries a quiet, profound wisdom for the resting mind. We so often forget that we carry our own perfect, built-in solutions to the intense heat and heavy stress of daily life. We always possess the natural inherent ability to effortlessly provide ourselves with exactly the shade, comfort and quiet protection we need, simply by shifting our perspective and gracefully using what we already have with us. Far below that shaded high-altitude rim, completely hidden at the absolute bottom of the echoing gorge where the heavy trapped heat eternally gathers, the dark, ancient basement rocks reveal stunning, unexpected veins of brilliant rushing colour, shooting chaotically and beautifully through the heavy charcoal-black bedrock of the Vishnu schist, and the Zoroaster granite are brilliant lightning bolt fractures of pure white quartz and pale rose-pink feldspar, known to geologists as pegmatite dikes. These smooth, glowing ribbons were formed when superheated. Volatile liquid magma was forcefully and violently injected into microscopic cracks in the older cooling rock nearly 2 billion years ago. Over unfathomable eons locked under the crushing weight of the Earth, it finally froze perfectly in place, creating massive, perfect crystals. Against the incredibly heavy, dark and intimidating stone, these bright crystalline bands look exactly like frozen majestic bolts of subterranean lightning completely trapped forever in the earth. To visualize these brilliant pink and white streaks illuminating the ancient dark stone is to understand a deep, universally comforting truth. Even in the absolute oldest, darkest, most impenetrable and rigid foundations of the world, there are always brilliant, sudden streaks of light, warmth, and beautiful colour quietly waiting to be discovered, proving that joy can perfectly endure even in the heaviest, most pressurised spaces. Flowing endlessly and heavily over those bright pink subterranean veins is the mighty Colorado River, a body of water so immense, deep, and impossibly powerful that it creates a complex, continuous acoustic signature that scientists can actually decipher. Hydrologists and geologists floating quietly on the surface have recently discovered that by carefully listening to the precise, varied acoustic frequencies of the roaring rapids, the specific pitch, the deep, resonating bass, and the high, rhythmic splashing timbre of the tumbling water, they can accurately determine the exact size, shape, and distribution of the massive, completely hidden boulders resting on the riverbed far below the opaque emerald green surface. The river is not just roaring blindly into the echoing canyon, it is constantly, beautifully singing a detailed, perfectly accurate acoustic map of its own hidden depths. It is a mesmerizing, hypnotic concept to realize that the moving water is actively translating the invisible, solid earth into a continuous flowing symphony of completely readable sound. It gently suggests that if we simply pause, soften our tired focus, and listen closely enough to the rushing flow, the loud, turbulent noises of our own lives will often clearly reveal the exact shape of the deep, unseen foundations perfectly resting beneath them, guiding us safely forward. As that rushing, symphonic river sound fades softly into the distance, returning our quiet awareness to the silent, sun-baked ledges of the high south rim, you might notice small, perfectly smooth, bowl-shaped depressions carved seamlessly into the solid sandstone. These natural, incredibly shallow stone basins are affectionately called tinajas. For the ancient ancestral Puebloan people who meticulously built the beautiful nearby Tusayan ruin over 800 years ago, these humble, quiet depressions were absolute life-saving miracles of nature. After a brief, heavy passing desert rainstorm, the smooth tinajas faithfully capture and gently hold the precious cool water for weeks at a time, creating tiny, flawless, mirrored pools of bright blue sky and beautifully reflected, flickering starlight scattered across the dry red rock. The ancient people did not need to relentlessly dig deep, exhausting wells, or constantly fight the arid, punishing landscape. They relied entirely on the stone's quiet, passive ability to hold exactly what naturally fell from the passing clouds. The body grows even heavier now, sinking luxuriously deeper into the mattress, and the mind can simply drift, realizing we do not always need to constantly seek, force, and strive. We only need to be open, perfectly still, and ready to beautifully receive the nourishment that naturally, quietly falls into our lives. Surrounding those tiny mirrored pools of quiet water is the vast, sweeping expanse of the Coconino Sandstone, the heavily petrified, cross-bedded remains of massive prehistoric desert dunes. If you look incredibly closely at the slanted, fossilized layers of this ancient hardened sand, feeling the rough, granular texture of deep time beneath your imaginary fingertips, you might easily spot the delicate, perfectly preserved footprints of small, lizard-like creatures and multi-legged millipedes from hundreds of millions of years ago. But there is a beautiful, gentle mystery perfectly hidden within these tiny, wandering tracks. Almost all of the preserved footprints are travelling straight up the steep slopes of the dunes. Practically none are ever found going down. Paleontologists softly theorize that as the small creatures walk down the steep, soft sand, their descending weight caused tiny, silent avalanches that instantly, completely erase their downward tracks, leaving only the memory of their upward climbs permanently etched into the solid stone. It is one of the most deeply comforting, profoundly poetic realities in all of geology. The Earth beautifully, seamlessly erases the heavy memory of our slips, our falls and our descents, choosing only to permanently preserve the quiet, enduring and triumphant record of our continuous, upward journeys toward the light. Tracing those ancient upward journeys beautifully back to the present day, the modern river flowing silently far below follows a surprisingly rhythmic, pulsing schedule that has absolutely nothing to do with heavy desert rain or melting mountain snow. Because the heavy rushing flow of the Colorado River is now meticulously managed by the massive Glen Canyon Dam, located many miles upstream, its water levels are intimately, invisibly tied to the daily rhythms of distant glowing cities. As people slowly wake up in the soft morning light and turn on their appliances, more water is released through the humming turbines, causing the deep river to rise gently, washing softly over the dry white sandbanks and leaving a dark, wet watermark. As the distant cities finally go to sleep and the world peacefully powers down, the river slowly, peacefully falls back into its narrow channel. The entire massive river experiences a gentle, artificial tide, rising and falling several feet every single day in perfect, silent rhythm with the sleeping and waking of millions of faraway, completely unseen humans. We're all so deeply, invisibly connected to one another. The simple, quiet act of turning off a bedside lamp in a distant, silent city gracefully and beautifully lowers the heavy water of a majestic canyon river in the absolute dark. As those distant, glowing cities finally fall completely asleep, and that heavy water gently recedes from the damp, sandy banks, the deepest, darkest limestone caves of the canyon gracefully release their own quiet, nocturnal inhabitants. Thousands of Mexican free-tailed bats drop silently and perfectly from the rough, cool ceilings of the damp caverns, unfolding their delicate, beautifully translucent wings to effortlessly catch the rising, warm evening thermals. They do not fly blindly into the vast echoing void of the deep canyon. They navigate the pitch-black, immensely complex topography, using incredibly precise, flawless echolocation. They emit soft, high-frequency clicks that bounce instantly off the sheer canyon walls, returning to their highly sensitive ears to paint a flawless, three-dimensional acoustic image of the vast gorge directly into their resting minds. They navigate the world entirely through the returning echoes of their own quiet voices, gliding smoothly through the velvet night air without ever touching the stone. It is a stunning, deeply relaxing reminder that when you cannot clearly see the winding path ahead of you, you can simply send out your own quiet, calm energy, trusting absolutely that the surrounding world will beautifully bounce back the exact perfect information you need to navigate safely and smoothly through the dark. As those delicate, silent bats dance seamlessly through the dark, echoing corridors, the canyon sky above slowly reveals its ultimate staggering, breathtaking purity. The inner gorge of the Grand Canyon is so incredibly isolated from the harsh, chaotic glow of artificial city light that it is officially recognized as having a Bortle-class one-night sky, the absolute darkest, most pristine, and unpolluted category of darkness that can possibly exist on Earth. In this profound, velvety, absolute blackness, the sky is not merely dotted with distant, flickering stars, it is completely, overwhelmingly flooded with the thick, glowing, luminous dust of the Milky Way galaxy, shining so brightly it looks like a heavy, glowing cloud. The darkness here is so profoundly pure, and the starlight is so incredibly intense, that on a completely moonless night, the gathered light of the Milky Way itself, or the brilliant, piercing, steady gleam of the distant planet Venus, will actually cast your physical, distinct silhouette perfectly against the pale canyon walls. You can let your mind float completely free with this impossible, beautiful thought as the Earth slowly rotates beneath the cosmos. You are casting a soft, quiet shadow using the gentle, travelling light of a planet millions of miles away. It is the perfect, absolute alignment of the vast, silent universe and the resting, peaceful self, a deeply restful, magnificent thought to hold softly in your mind as we drift together even further into the breathtaking, star-drenched, eternal peace of the long night. As you drift together even further into that breathtaking, star-drenched peace of the long night, the cool, descending desert air gently coaxes one of the canyon's most secretive and magnificent botanicals to finally awaken. Hidden in the dry, sandy washes and along the dusty moonlit trails rest the sacred datura, a sprawling, low-lying plant with deep, dark green leaves that spends the entire blistering day completely closed and withdrawn to protect itself from the scorching sun. But as the absolute dark takes hold, guided entirely by the cooling temperature and the soft light of the moon, it performs a beautiful silent unfurling. The plant produces massive, incredibly delicate, velvety white flowers shaped like elegant wide-mouthed trumpets, some reaching up to 8 inches across. As these pristine white blossoms open to the night sky, they release an astonishingly rich, heavy and intoxicatingly sweet fragrance into the air, specifically designed to call out to the giant hovering sphinx moths that navigate by starlight. The blooms glow with a pale, luminescent radiance against the dark red earth, completely transforming the harsh, shadowy desert floor into a fragrant, softly glowing nocturnal garden. It is a profound, deeply soothing reminder that even in the most intimidating, arid darkness, there is always a breathtaking, perfectly orchestrated beauty quietly waiting for its precise moment to peacefully open and share its sweetness with the world. The exact same pure silver moonlight that beautifully illuminates those pale, fragrant blossoms also catches the faint, delicate, glittering edges of the canyon's absolute softest stone. Tucked away in specific, quiet, remote corners of the Monkopi Formation, gently woven through the crumbling, dark, rust-coloured shale, are brilliant horizontal veins of pure crystalline gypsum. Unlike the incredibly hard, unyielding limestone or the dense, ancient granite that forms the terrifying vertical cliffs, this gypsum is so wonderfully soft that you can easily, smoothly scratch its surface with nothing more than your own thumbnail. These glittering layers were formed hundreds of millions of years ago in incredibly shallow, completely calm, slowly evaporating tidal lagoons, where the ancient sun patiently baked the salty water away, leaving behind pure, translucent white crystals. In the deep, quiet dark of the canyon, when the starlight hits the exposed veins, they shimmer softly, looking exactly like ribbons of crushed diamonds or frozen moonlight locked perfectly and securely inside the ancient red dust. Running an imaginary hand over this yielding, soft, glittering stone provides a profound, tactile comfort to the resting mind. It gently proves that within the massive, intimidating, rock-solid structures of our lives, there are always hidden, completely yielding layers of soft, brilliant light, formed during ancient periods of absolute sun-warmed calm. When the heavy velvet darkness eventually begins to soften, gracefully giving way to the soft, bruised purples and delicate, glowing peaches of the early dawn, the absolute stillness of the great chasm is broken by a single, perfect, and unforgettable sound. High up on the sheer, echoing rock walls, the tiny canyon wren awakens to greet the returning light. This small, unassuming, rust-coloured bird possesses a voice that has perfectly, flawlessly evolved to harmonise with the monumental, cavernous acoustics of the deep gorge. Instead of a standard cheerful chirp, the canyon wren sings a breathtaking, cascading, descending series of bright, liquid, echoing notes. The song physically mimics the very shape of the canyon itself, starting high and clear, and then gently, beautifully tumbling downward, growing slower and softer as the notes echo off the massive limestone walls, sounding exactly like a handful of small crystal pebbles dropped into a perfectly still, deep pool of water. The sound rings out with absolute clarity, filling the vast 18-mile-wide emptiness with a profound, descending musical grace. Listening to that falling, crystal-clear song, your own breathing can naturally, effortlessly sync with its slow, cascading descent. You can exhale completely with the fading notes, allowing the physical body to grow profoundly heavy, comfortably warm, and entirely supported by the massive waiting earth beneath you. Resting quietly on the massive ancient boulders where that beautiful liquid song endlessly echoes, exist a completely different form of life that beautifully redefines the very concept of time, urgency, and quiet endurance. Clinging intimately to the rough, weathered surface of the oldest rocks are sprawling, intricate communities of crustose lichens. While the rushing river carves the deep gorge and the frantic falcons dive through the sky, these lichens embody the absolute supreme mastery of deep patience. They do not possess roots, and they do not frantically seek out deep water. They simply pull whatever microscopic moisture they need directly from the rare morning dew and the passing, invisible air. They grow at an astonishingly, almost incomprehensibly slow rate, sometimes expanding outward by only a single, tiny millimetre every century. Yet, over thousands of quiet, undisturbed years, they meticulously paint the dull, grey boulders in brilliant, shockingly vibrant splashes of neon green, bright sun yellow, and deep rusted orange. They are a permanent living mosaic, a slow-motion explosion of colour completely bonded to the ancient stone. They ask for absolutely nothing, and they are in absolutely no hurry to be anywhere else. They gently teach the wandering mind that the most beautiful, lasting marks we make on the world do not require frantic speed or overwhelming effort. They only require us to quietly, patiently remain exactly where we are, slowly blooming perfectly in place. Deep beneath those sun-warmed, brightly painted boulders, locked securely inside the intensely compressed, dark, metamorphic basement rocks of the inner gorge, the earth holds on to tiny, precious embers of ancient subterranean heat. The Vishnu schist, the absolute oldest, darkest, and most intimidating layer of rock in the entire canyon, was forged nearly 2 billion years ago under unimaginable crushing pressure and searing molten temperatures miles beneath the Earth's surface. Yet, hidden flawlessly within the chaotic, swirling dark grey and black bands of this ancient rock are perfect, stunningly beautiful, dark red almandine garnets. These semi-precious gemstones grew incredibly slowly in the absolute pitch-black dark, crystallizing perfectly as the intense subterranean pressures forced the common minerals into shapes of flawless geometric beauty. They rest securely in the rock like deeply sleeping, frozen embers of the Earth's fiery youth, completely hidden from the light of the sun for over 1 billion years, until the patient river finally washed the softer stone away to reveal them. To visualize these dark, perfectly formed jewels resting safely in the absolute deepest, heaviest foundation of the canyon is to understand a deeply comforting reality. The heaviest pressures and the darkest, most overwhelming forces of our past do not merely crush us. They are actively, quietly forging brilliant, beautiful, and completely unbreakable facets of our character deep inside, waiting peacefully to be brought gently into the light. While those dark, unyielding gems rest permanently in the solid basement rock, the flowing water continues to gently sculpt hidden, secluded masterpieces of temporary perfection just a few miles away in the winding side tributaries. Tucked away from the roaring main channel are narrow, deeply shaded slot canyons, such as the exquisite hidden corridors of the Deer Creek Narrows. Here, the sheer walls of the pale sandstone completely close in, leaving only a tiny winding ribbon of blue sky visible hundreds of feet above. These impossibly narrow, twisting hallways were carved not by the steady, daily flow of a river, but by the rare, sudden rushes of seasonal flash floods completely loaded with abrasive fine desert sand. The violent water meticulously polished the hard stone until it became flawlessly smooth, carving the sheer walls into incredibly sensual, undulating, sweeping curves that look exactly like heavy draped silk or frozen pale amber waves. Yet, for 99% of the year, these beautifully carved, twisting hallways rest in absolute, complete, and total silence, holding only the cool, still air and the soft, reflected, glowing light bouncing off the curved stone. You can simply allow your mind to drift peacefully through these smooth, sweeping, sunlit corridors, feeling the cool, frictionless stone beneath your imaginary fingertips, resting in the comforting, certain knowledge that absolutely nothing needs to be held too tightly right now. In the most heavily sun-scorched, unforgiving vertical cliffs directly above those cool, profoundly shaded narrows, life has somehow found the ultimate, invisible, and completely ingenious sanctuary from the blinding desert light. The high, exposed sandstone walls can bake to unbearable, searing temperatures in the absolute peak of the midsummer afternoon, making the sheer surface entirely uninhabitable for almost any living thing. But a brilliant, highly specialized community of microscopic organisms known as cryptoendolithic bacteria has found a beautifully perfect hidden solution. They do not attempt to survive on the harsh, exposed surface of the rock. Instead, they actually migrate and live entirely inside the stone itself. They slip quietly into the microscopic, porous spaces resting just millimeters beneath the outer crust of the translucent quartz sand grains. Here, the solid rock acts as a perfect natural tinted window, beautifully filtering out the deadly burning ultraviolet radiation while allowing just enough soft, diffuse sunlight through for the tiny organisms to peacefully photosynthesize. If you were to crack the dry rock open, you would see a faint glowing band of vibrant emerald green hiding safely just below the dry red surface. It is the absolute, ultimate expression of finding a safe haven. It reminds us that when the outside world becomes too harsh, too loud, or too overwhelming, we can always retreat gently inward, finding a cool, perfectly protected and beautiful sanctuary hidden safely just beneath our own surface, basking completely motionless on the surface of those exact same living rocks. Absorbing the gentle, forgiving warmth of the early morning sun is a creature of startling, almost tropical visual brilliance. The eastern-collared lizard sits proudly on the high, dusty limestone ledges, looking completely and wonderfully out of place in the muted, earthy palette of the vast red desert. The male lizard is adorned in spectacular, vibrant shades of bright turquoise blue, vivid aquamarine, and brilliant sun yellow, with two distinct stark black collars painted perfectly around its neck. In a landscape where survival typically depends on blending seamlessly into the dull rust and pale tan of the sandstone, this small, confident creature is a sudden, unapologetic splash of vivid electric colour. It does not scurry frantically or hide nervously in the dark shadows. It simply perches on the highest, most prominent rocks, resting in absolute, complete stillness for hours at a time, calmly surveying the immense, echoing chasm spread out before it. There is an incredible, profound peace in its total lack of fear and its absolute stillness. It simply exists, beautiful and bright, completely comfortable in its own vibrant skin, perfectly at home on the very edge of the massive, staggering drop, resting securely under the vast, unbroken dome of the desert sky. Looking out from the dizzying, high-altitude precipice, where that vibrant, resting lizard sits, down toward the very bottom of the colossal chasm, the human eye is treated to one of the canyon's most profound, deeply calming, and persistent visual illusions. The Colorado River is a massive, incredibly powerful force of nature, completely filled with roaring, heavy rapids, churning whirlpools, and thousands of tons of rushing, violent, turbulent water. Yet, because you are often viewing the river from an astonishing elevation of over a full mile above it, the overwhelming physical distance completely beautifully filters out the chaotic motion. From the high, quiet rim, the raging, deafening rapids completely lose their violent speed. The immense rushing water appears to the resting eye to be completely, absolutely motionless. It does not look like a roaring river, but rather a solid, frozen, unmoving ribbon of smooth, opaque green glass, resting silently and permanently at the absolute bottom of the ancient gorge. The breath settles even deeper, growing longer and slower as the mind completely absorbs this vast, comforting distance. There is a profound, lasting peace in simply stepping back. When we manage to gain enough distance from the roaring, turbulent, stressful currents of our own lives, the overwhelming chaos beautifully fades away, leaving only a quiet, smooth, and perfectly manageable picture of complete, unmoving serenity. That perfect, unmoving, timeless serenity is permanently, beautifully recorded on the sheer, towering canyon walls in a majestic, entirely natural tapestry known as desert varnish. As you gaze across the vast expanse, you will notice massive, sweeping, vertical streaks of deep, glossy black and rich, dark chocolate brown that elegantly, seamlessly drip down the bright red and pale yellow sandstone cliffs. These are not water stains, nor are they the result of ancient fires. They are the incredibly slow, patient masterpiece of microscopic bacteria pulling trace amounts of manganese and iron directly out of the passing, windless air. Over thousands of unbroken, silent years, these tiny organisms meticulously cement these dark, heavy minerals to the sheer rock face, slowly polishing them with the blowing dust until they gleam with a smooth, dark, reflective sheen. The rock is literally, beautifully painting itself with the invisible minerals held in the atmosphere. It is a slow, deeply beautiful, and totally silent collaboration between the solid, ancient stone, the moving, invisible air, and the incredibly patient passage of deep time. The desert varnish darkens the walls like massive, beautiful, descending shadows that never move, holding the quiet, enduring memory of 1,000 passing centuries perfectly in place, creating a vast, magnificent gallery of resting time that opens a soft, beautiful bridge to the deeper, even more quiet horizons waiting patiently in the dark. As we reach the very end of this long, winding journey through the deep layers of the earth, resting peacefully at the quiet foundation of the world, there is one final, overarching truth that gracefully wraps around the entire chasm. When we look at the monumental, staggered cliffs, the towering red temples, and the mile-deep expanse of silent stone, the human mind naturally assumes it is looking at a finished masterpiece. We see it as a permanent static monument, a silent museum of rock completed long ago by the heavy hands of deep time. But the most profound, beautiful reality of the Grand Canyon is that it is not a finished object at all. It is a living, breathing, continuing action. Even right now, in the absolute pitch-black silence of this very night, as the heavy, cold Emerald River sweeps powerfully over the dark, water-polished boulders of the inner gorge, the canyon is actively, physically becoming deeper. It is estimated that the rushing water and the suspended, swirling grains of desert sand carve away the ancient, unyielding bedrock at a rate of roughly the thickness of a single piece of paper every single year. It is an incredibly slow, microscopic and entirely imperceptible change to the naked eye, yet it is completely, beautifully, and undeniably unstoppable. The canyon is never, ever truly finished. It does not possess a final form. It exists in a perpetual, eternal state of constant, gentle becoming. It teaches the resting mind the ultimate, most deeply comforting lesson of all, that absolutely nothing in this world, not even a mile-deep gorge carved into solid billion-year-old granite, is ever permanently stuck, stagnant, or finalized. There is always a slow, beautiful, unseen progress happening perfectly in the dark. You too are beautifully allowed to be a masterpiece in progress, quietly and gracefully shaped by the gentle, endless flow of time, never needing to be completely finished, just peacefully, softly continuing on your own slow, steady journey forward into the waiting night. The long, beautiful journey down through the ancient, resting layers of time is now completely, softly finished. We have travelled slowly from the high, sun-drenched, fragrant pine forests of the upper rim, drifting all the way down to the cool, dark, whispering waters of the absolute deepest, oldest stone. You have gently gathered so many quiet fragments of history tonight, so many soft glowing colours, and so many gentle echoing sounds. But as the heavy velvet night fully embraces the vast sleeping desert, you do not need to hold on to a single one of them. You can simply, beautifully let them all go. Let the lingering images of the soaring falcons, the pure silver moonlight, and the deep resting red sandstone dissolve seamlessly into the cool waiting air. They will remain completely safe out there in the timeless protective canyon, perfectly preserved in the unbroken dark, so that your own mind can finally become entirely beautifully empty. Notice the gentle, rhythmic, effortless rise and fall of your own breathing. It perfectly matches the slow, patient, endless, sweeping flow of the ancient river far below. With every slow exhale, your physical body sinks just a little bit deeper into the mattress, growing heavier, softer, and profoundly, completely relaxed. Your shoulders completely release their final lingering hold. Your jaw naturally, beautifully softens and lets go. The quiet space behind your resting eyes becomes a wide, open, dark, and incredibly comforting sky. There is absolutely nowhere else you need to be in this exact moment. There is nothing else you need to figure out, no massive heights to bravely climb, and no shadowy depths to carefully navigate. The earth is securely, lovingly holding your entire weight, just as effortlessly as it holds the ancient sleeping stones of the gorge. You're entirely safe here. You're completely supported by the gravity of the world. The planet will simply continue its slow, beautiful, quiet turning in the dark without requiring any effort, any thought, or any action from you at all. Just breathe. Let the tired mind completely unspool into the quiet, velvet vastness. Drift slowly, peacefully into the deep, unbroken quiet. Completely surrender to the heavy, peaceful, unconditionally waiting dark. And now, 101 wonders are resting with you. Sleep now. Good night.